Welcome to the 45th episode of Cartoon Avatars. I'm your host, Logan Bartlett, and joined today by Rashad Assir, and what is a end-of-year recap, bonus highlights episode 45. I think what you're going to hear on this episode is Rashad and I talking a little bit about the year that was for Cartoon Avatars, as well as the tech industry at large. And then also on the back half, we pulled together a kind of a highlight video, a best of the different conversations, crypto debates, arguments, outrageous stuff that happened over the course of the year with this show. So hopefully people will like that. But first, Rashad, it's been, I guess now, 11 months we started in the beginning of February, I think. So we're basically 11 months into the show, and figured we would rehash a little bit of what's happened, what's gone right, what's gone wrong, what we've learned, as well as, I guess, where we're going from here. So thank you for pulling together some questions so that I wasn't just shooting from the hip on anything.
Yeah. It's actually, my friends know this well about me, but one of my favorite things to do is just recap like the night, recap the month, recap the year at around this time too. So I feel like it's
you do that socially, like in group chats. Are you going to say, like, guys, let's analyze what happened?
I did it with a close group of friends last year, like post Thanksgiving, and we just like went through each person and went really deep on like, how was your first quarter of the year, and then summer, and then different things that happened. And yeah, it's a lot of fun.
That sounds like something that like theoretically someone would do, but in practice, I'm surprised. I'm surprised you actually went through with that. But what was the biggest learning in reviewing years and quarterly increments among your friends?
I just feel like it's a way to re-experience things that happen really fast, like even getting into this job, right? I left my job and then got into this one so quickly, and then just hit the ground running and start working on stuff. And all of a sudden you're super busy. So taking a second to be like, oh, how did I feel about that? What was my feeling at the time, and how did it evolve? Like, I find that to be, you get to experience and like get more juice out of the thing that just like happened. Like, okay, I'll give you a perfect example. Our holiday party, we didn't get to recap. And I just got on a flight, flew back to New York. And I was like, damn, I wish I had that like brunch where we get to just talk about like what happened, what did you do, and who was a little on the dance floor doing the wrong things. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think we know that was you. But yeah, that does make sense. So I guess for this show, you joined in the beginning of middle of January, end of January.
Yeah, February. So I broke it down into basically like first 10 to 15 episodes, summer, and then like back end of the year.
But the show actually started like right when you joined. And I think people have heard me talk about this a little bit, but like the inspiration of it originally was kind of seeing the success that the All In guys had and looking at how competitive the venture market had gotten, and trying to find a way to cut through the noise in some way, shape, or form, and figured I had a big enough Twitter following to try this. And so I reached out to two friends, and Nikita Beer, who's now the CEO of Gas App, as well as Zach Kukoff, who is an investor at General Catalyst. We had been buddies for a little while. When we probably November of 2021 started testing, thinking about what this would be. And there were a bunch of learnings. I think we did like 4 or 5, maybe prep-ish episodes. But one of the things that I think we found early on was that we weren't very good. And part of that is just like, part of that was it reps, right? Like 4 or 5 episodes isn't nearly enough to do it. And then the other thing was we all had pretty big Twitter followings. And so people came in expecting us to be a certain type of way on the first episode. And when you're starting from nothing and just kind of building up in a vacuum, where like, when you were originally starting your TikTok, right? Or you were originally doing what you did with Snapchat, just with your buddies, it's the bar is so low because no one expects anything from you. You're just kind of messing around with content that didn't exist before, right? We launched with I don't know, 100,000 plus kind of combined followers or something, and so the spotlight was immediately higher or brighter than and the bar higher than just like the average show that's launching in a vacuum, right? And so we didn't get the forgiveness of people testing it, testing the product incrementally as it got better. I think we got a lot of people testing it early on and being like, oh, wow, this isn't that good. Like these guys aren't that good at this, right? And so I think that was definitely a learning. And also like personality wise, I also found that I wasn't particularly, I think my opinions on stuff are often at the edges of what could be considered interesting. And, you know, like I can have interesting insights at times, but I certainly am not a good like hot take person. And the format we had really lent itself to hot takes, I think. And so like, it was an interesting sort of, we said we were going to do it for 4 episodes, and then we said we would do it for 12, I think. And so we kind of made it through that journey, and ultimately it became pretty clear, almost like starting a company, right? With like co-founders and a lack of product market fit and all that. It was like pretty clear that the product wasn't working for a bunch of different reasons. But it was interesting. It was an interesting sort of first 3 months of mucking around and trying to make it work.
And then things kind of naturally happened where, you've talked a little bit about how the restrictions on Zach's firm prevented you guys from going to certain places. He
had an RIA, and you lived some of this with me, but like, you know, they ultimately wanted review capability, and we were trying to get it out as quickly as possible because we were doing more topical stuff. And so that just kind of led to us being at odds, where I was trying to get things out as quickly as possible and they were trying to review things. So yeah, it was.
And
just
then Nikita left with what we now know is he was building gas, living in the founder house with a bunch of engineers working.
He was dying down the stretch, by the way. Like he was trying to do both for a long time, and that was exhausting for him. And so, I mean, obviously it's been successful what he ended up going to do, but we were sort of limping along through the end there.
And then eventually you brought on Zach. But before we go there, I guess, like, what was your last sort of thing about this? Like, what was your transition from or thinking at the time of like, okay, I've now this original vision that I had for the show where I'm chatting with my buddies about what happened on Twitter to now I got to run the show solo. Like, did you have a vision where you like, let me just take this episode by episode? How did you actually get through that transition to ultimately continue the show?
Yeah, I was down in Miami for Miami Tech Week, and I got Keith Raboy. He said he would sit down, and Dak was originally supposed to come down, and then he couldn't because I think he got COVID or something, and like couldn't actually make the trip down. And so it ended up just being me and Keith, and that sort of led to the segue of like doing more interviews and trying to get occasional people to pop on for conversations. And I had done an episode with Weinberg before that. And so that was probably like the darkest. The beginning was tough because like it was clear we didn't have it right, but at least there were other people with me that we were like trying it. At that point in time, it was tough because like I didn't know how I was going to put something out there every week, right? Like I sort of knew I was going to do some combination of interviews with people as well as maybe some like topical stuff or whatever. But that was like every episode was a fucking grind to get something out there because I just didn't know where the next week's episode was going to come from, right? And so that was hard. Weinberg ended up being something of a godsend through that period because he started to enjoy it and come on more and more, and then he started feeling like the crypto stuff, obviously stoked some flames for him and the industry and all of that stuff. But like those first like 3 or 4 weeks after, I sort of just committed to myself that I was going to put something out, right, and get someone to talk with me, and I didn't know exactly what format it was, but just sort of forced my way through. But that was not a particularly enjoyable period of time, was after those guys left. And then like, as I was kind of trying to get something out there every single week.
Is it the sheer will, or like what you were clearly getting some high profile, great guests on that eventually made for a great product? Although it sounds like the sausage making was messy and that sort of thing. But like, were you just like persistent about reaching out to people and
pretty much
taking 10 no's for every one yes kind of thing?
Yeah. I mean, I'm going back and looking. It was like, it was Raboy was helpful. Josh Wolf and Scott Belsky came on. Packy McCormick and Ben Thompson came on. Then I got Aaron Levy lined up. Benedict Evans came on. Parker Conrad came on. Matt Levine came on. Jon Wu made his first appearance in the crypto debate, like the whole Packy thing sort of. So I guess it actually it played out far smoother. I mean, those are some like good episodes with good people and entertaining content, like in retrospect. So I guess my memory is of it being bleaker than the actual output of the product was, because I think that was actually like decently good products. But yeah, it was definitely every single week felt like a real slog just to get the right caliber of person to come on. You're sort of balancing like chemistry with the person, with them being interesting, with you being on. Yeah. You don't want to deprecate the quality of like the type of person you're going to have on. Right. So it was like, it was definitely a tough stretch, but it ended up coming out pretty well. And then obviously the crypto stuff hit, and crypto was starting to unwind a little bit, but there were still people kind of vocally defending it. And Weinberg obviously dove into his corner of what are the use cases and all of that. And more people started to jump in with it. And it was nice because people were very interested. And like some of those episodes are still some of the best performing ones because people like really liked that. But it felt like there was going to be a cap on how long you could actually keep running that different thing back over and over again. And so it was weird to sort of purposely walk away from that, right? Because I think just from a pure rating standpoint, the natural gravitation of it would have been to like be more of a cable news show and just like have people yell at each other, and you start to become Jerry Springer of like tech news discussions, right? And just be more and more outrageous. And at some point I had to just like say enough is enough of doing this, despite how entertaining it was. And the breaking point was definitely for me was definitely after the Sam Lessin Zach Weinberg debate, in which I obviously didn't do a great job of actually moderating it, but also it was so over the top that I was like, all right, I probably need to take a step back and make sure the show doesn't just become this, right?
I was going through Twitter and part of prepping for this, and I found that meme someone made about, it's like the school fight breaking out and the guy in the corner that just like lighting a bong.
Yeah.
And he's labeled as Logan Bartlett. That was the peak of those. I think that was in reference to that episode.
I think it was too. Yeah. Just sort of sitting by the side as all that was going on. Yeah.
But I remember you being deliberate about making it not a crypto show, and then making sure that there was still some substance beyond that. Even if Zach was going to continue to come on, it wasn't just going to be crypto battles. So I think we found a good balance in like, you want to strike while the iron's hot and get the most juice. Like when something's working from a content perspective, you run it back until it stops working. But hopefully, I think we've hit the right balance there.
Yeah. And at that point in time, I actually stopped looking at the numbers of like how many people were listening to it. And it was just like, I couldn't be beholden to the ratings, because if I was, then I would just keep having people yell at each other and like say, have ad hominem attacks back and forth, right? Then that would have driven the best ratings. And we were climbing at such a big rate in the charts and stuff. And it just felt like it was cheap, like hacks. It wasn't going to be sustainable. It felt like it was a sugar high that like ultimately was going to wear off. And so purposefully pulling back from that, it was both, one, it felt like we were beating a dead horse at some point with the use cases, but two, it felt like it just wasn't the show that I think I wanted us to have. And so it felt like it ran its course ultimately when we kind of pulled back from it.
Yeah. So the other style that we've kind of alluded to of show that became kind of like the standard towards the back end of the year was just these long form interviews with very awesome people, Palmer Luckey, Costolo, particularly like people that had, I don't know, controversies or things that have happened in the last like 5 to 10 years that they could kind of tell their story. And among one of the more positive comments, we won't go through all the negative TikTok comments that we get. But the one that I think people come back to a lot is like, there's clearly a lot of thoughtful prep that goes into these interviews. Like, have you found a repeatable way to prepare for a conversation with Mark Cuban, and thinking about both like asking interesting questions for you, but also Mark Cuban's done 1,000 interviews. How do you not just make it the same as the other ones?
Yeah. No, I haven't. And it still is anxiety inducing every time you go into one, because you need to make it different than especially the people like the best quadrant. And I forget if I've said this before, but it's like people with interesting opinions and people without bosses are like that's the 2x2 quadrant that people are interesting in. And particularly if they're without bosses and have been dragged publicly in the media before. And so like Mark Cuban fits that bill. Palmer Luckey fits that bill. Dick Costolo fits that bill. Parker Conrad fits that bill, right? Like in that, when you're in that quadrant, you're very willing to say whatever you actually believe. And so pulling interesting things out, that was actually what was nice about that, was because of some combination of prep, as well as I really want to do these things more and more. If you look at in person, if you look at like Joe Rogan and Lex Friedman and people that do this, like they often really insist on doing it in person. And I'm kind of balancing the ability to get people wherever and to get high profile people with the desire to have it be in person. And that's obviously there's a trade-off with those two, right? They're very much at odds with one another. And so I would say that it's something I think about every time, is like, what can I uniquely kind of draw out of this person that hasn't been done before, or what's an interesting thread that I can pull on that's just like a little bit different than what other people have pulled on. With Palmer, we really went deep into the Facebook thing and like him telling that story of what it was like inside Facebook. And with Parker, it was being ousted from Zenefits. And those are two examples of CEOs being ousted from their company, right? Giving people a forum and opportunity to tell that stuff, that it's not the most scalable thing. I think it's what I've enjoyed the most. And so it's what feels most natural to me. And so I think that's kind of the format that I probably will occasionally keep coming back to, like commenting on news or commenting on certain stuff that I have opinions about or whatever that is. But like, that's the single thing that I've actually enjoyed the most, that feels the most repeatable. So I think that's probably what we're going to see. I mean, at this point, and you know this, we're probably, I said I would do this for a year, and we're about a month away from a year. And so I have stuff lined up for another, call it 4 to 6 weeks of doing this. And then at some point over the course of probably the holidays, but then also, through that period of time, kind of taking inventory of what has gone well, what I've enjoyed. I also think, we haven't done a great job of like promoting or we haven't actively promoted this. And so I guess this is a call to action for people, like, to please like and subscribe on YouTube. That's one thing that I think we really should do a better job of. I would like to get every video we do up to at least 100 likes. I would like to get subscribers in the next bit, well north of where they are on YouTube. And so I think to some extent, like, I've uniquely enjoyed this, and I'm kind of doing it for myself in some ways, but I would also like to see continued validation that, like, it is resonating with people. And so I think figuring out the format that I've enjoyed the most and figuring out how to keep going with it. I mean, one of those things is going to be the input and validation from people and the data and all of that stuff. And so I think we probably can do a better job of promoting it and encouraging people to like and subscribe on all the videos and share it with your friends and all that stuff, which is something we've been pretty passive on.
I agree with that. The self-promotion of stuff can fall by the wayside, I think, sometimes. But
it feels weird, right? It feels weird to do it, but like I'm being honest. Like, hey, that's going to be an input into my decision of whether or not, in what form we keep going. And if it keeps growing at steady clips and people are liking it and our subscriber numbers keep going up and all that, then I'll feel some level of validation that we clearly haven't hit the TAM of the types of people that should care about it, right? I can just look at, I don't know, what Lex Friedman does or what All In has done or whatever, right? And they're such a magnitude larger than what we are, like whatever, thousands of X's, that there's clearly more room to grow. And so figuring out how to get there will be informative to me.
Anything else on the docket for next year? I know we've talked about doing potentially like a live show, either live stream to YouTube or live in the sense of, hosting people and having a live audience and that kind of thing. It sounds like you want to do more in-person stuff.
Yeah, I mean, welcome suggestions, right? I think these next couple weeks are going to be iterative on, we have at least one show already recorded that should be a really good one. We'll release the first week of January now. I have 3 or 4 others already lined up, scheduled. And so that'll take us through January with a bunch of really, really good, exciting people. And but I think everything else is kind of on the table, right? I think want to figure out how to keep growing this. And so if people have suggestions of things they like, things they don't like, and what the appropriate elements of the show that we should continue to do, what we should deprecate. At the end of the day, there's not a lot of analytics you can do on these things, right? You sort of look at the top line and you kind of trust your gut and what comes naturally and what is the type of show you want to make. And so if people have suggestions, I'm happy to receive DMs into my Twitter inbox. I'm also happy to ignore those as people will often send random off the wall kind of suggestions and stuff, but feel free to reach out with any suggestions there. I think all of those things like Q&A, I don't know if doing like a live in-person show is actually something that we would do, but I can imagine doing a live YouTube show. I can imagine going into more of investment process related stuff for us. I don't know, a bunch of different things. So I welcome any suggestions or any guests, by the way. Like I have a list of guests that I want to have, and I want to keep the bar high on the people that we're having on and their credibility and all that stuff. But that's another one that I think people could suggest is who might be interesting or fun to talk to.
Exciting stuff.
Rashad, what do you think? You've been here from the beginning of that. I've been sort of waxing and waning on this. Like, what's your opinion?
Well, it's obviously a lot of work that goes into it, and there are trade-offs that you have to make between like what you commonly refer to as your real job, especially when the market turns and things like that. But I don't know. I think content is kind of the way, obviously bias here. And to the extent I think we're also learning in a way that will continue to compound. We'll make changes in the way that we publish to YouTube, even small things like thumbnails and the way that we title things, the way that we share and promote this, that will continue to grow. And if you talk to anyone who's been doing this long enough, it's always sort of a slog, and it takes forever, but it's ultimately pretty rewarding. So I hope we continue to do it. I've certainly enjoyed it. I've taken a lot of inspiration from the way that you specifically bring on like guests and ask really thoughtful questions and come in with a super prepared mind. Like I've tried to translate all of that to my own sort of like content initiatives. So yeah, it'll be fun. I hope we'll do more in-person stuff too. I know we're working on potentially some physical space and that kind of thing. So I think that'll make it easier. And that stuff's just more fun anyways.
Okay, good. Well, hope everyone enjoys the holidays. Feel free to send along suggestions and ideas. Please do like, subscribe, share, review, all of that. I'm going to make that a more constant refrain over the course of the next couple of weeks here, just to see where we end up. Just trying to set tangible goals of, I think we're, if we can get to 3,000-ish subscribers on YouTube, I think right now we're at like 2,300 or something. If we can get every video to about 100 likes, I think that's kind of some reasonable goals that we're setting here. So ask for everyone's support there. And thanks everyone for listening. Hope you enjoy the highlights episode of the year that was cartoon avatars coming up here now.
I think what works is, and this is an amazing message that like the mainstream media has gone the opposite direction, which is when you screw up, you have to go over the top and owning it. Be like, what? And so whenever I get even the slightest thing wrong, not only do I always correct it, but I'll spend a whole segment saying, this was my thought process. This is how I ended up saying this sort of thing. And sometimes it was a factual thing. And I feel terrible with those. Cause I'm like, how did I do that? Usually it's like some sort of cognitive bias where it's like, look, obviously, if you have a model of the world, which is, the foundation of what you write, you're always susceptible to confirmation bias, where it's like, oh, look, here's an example that perfectly fits my model, right? And then you miss something on the other side. Sometimes you're just unlucky. Like, probably one of my worst things was WeWork. I was very optimistic on them, and I actually still am I think it was right. They just went too far, and if they had come along, I mean, I think they're actually doing decently now, right? Because COVID comes along, you have this whole sort of work from home. It's like the thesis was right, but the timing was wrong. It's like a startup, right? That could be the case with an article where you have like your thesis was actually right. The timing or circumstances were wrong. You're going to be right eventually. But in the meantime, it's very painful because like at the end, this is a Packy newsletter. It's a Ben newsletter. So I have to own it and that's the most important thing for a reputation is like, look, I own it. I'm sorry. I screwed up.
I mean, WeWork would have gotten away with it too if it weren't for that damn S1. Like they were so close. I mean, in the public markets would have crushed them and all of that, but they were so close to pulling off that IPO.
I don't know. Without the self-dealing and all that, it seems like that's where they really soured, was on all the little bullshit around the edges. And I think the public markets actually would have been receptive.
Well, the funny thing about my super positive article is in there, I said I would not invest in this company because of all this bullshit. And so it's funny. It's really funny because that article actually was it was mostly right. I was right on the model being really interesting. I was right in the long-term like trends favoring it. I was right to say don't invest in this company because there's all this bullshit going on. It was a weird thing where I screwed up in the tone. Like and part of it was, and this is always a danger, everyone was so down on it and like the temptation to be contrary and like get it right. And it's annoying because it failed for the exact reasons that I said, but I have to admit, I stuck those in to be clear, and I wasn't like the tone was wrong. Like that is a weird one where I was wrong because of the tone, and I was wrong. I accept it, but accepting it is important. So,
but this is where I think Packy benefits from being an optimist in some ways. Is like when
he gets more of a pass on it. Yeah.
Well, if we're investing in a company and it has a 20% chance of success, you better have 5 or 6 of those because you're going to look, even if your mental model is right on it, right? And you're saying, hey, 20% chance this is going to be Stripe. 80% of the time, you're going to look stupid. And so internalizing when there's only one outcome, internalizing probabilities of things like that, like you gave all the caveats on the WeWork thing. And so it just, cynicism always looks better in hindsight than the optimistic outcomes look. And so the ball goes further when you're right than 0 is when you're wrong. Right?
Absolutely. Yeah. No, and from an investor perspective, no, I think that's spot on. And I think that's a really great point to make. And this is, I think, Packy, you don't need to worry about something blowing up because I think anyone who reads you understands you're dealing with venture capital dynamics, which is most of these companies are should fail, right? And so, but if one hits it big, it makes up for all of them. And I think this is just an issue where I was a little out of my box because I mostly do public companies. And at that point, they've already succeeded, right? And so whenever I'm a little outside that, that's where it gets riskier. And I think that was probably an example there. But then again, we had the S1, so whatever. It is what it is. I didn't expect to get out here talking about WeWork, but I guess I brought it on myself. So
that emotion that you feel. I mean, I don't know how you guys are feeling about this, but seeing just Twitter and seeing VCs and public market investors and everybody right now talking about like how obvious it was that things were going to crash and how they've luckily been responsible, but most of the other investors have not been responsible. And like this whole thing that's going on right now where everybody is just so unbelievably bearish and like kind of smug almost, it makes you want to just write the opposite piece over and over and over again.
To be clear, this isn't about Twitter specifically. This is on Twitter, VCs saying the market's gone down and all that. Yeah.
Everyone is always sort of right in hindsight for sure. I mean, I think this is, the reality is, when it comes to you and I, like our stuff's out there. So you can go back and look at it and read it. And, I wrote a piece in 2015 basically saying this, anyone who says this is a bubble is stupid and going through all these sorts of things. And so you could be a guy on Twitter and you could go pull that piece here and say, look, you moron, there's a bubble. And I'm like, what happened between 2015 and 2022? Right? Like that was completely right. I had someone do that to me the other day. They pulled up a 2013 piece on Facebook where I said Facebook needs to be an app. They need to abandon these platform ambitions. And they're like, oh yeah, look what Apple did to them. I'm like, yeah, look what Apple did to them in 2021 after they made 8 years of astronomical profits. I was completely right?
It is funny too. Like that must annoy you still. And that shocked me, I think, to the extent to which like a random troll on Twitter can annoy me. I don't know if you still feel that kind of 8 years into this journey, but like even that like person with one follower can really just like put a dent in your day.
It's one of the hardest things you have to learn to adjust to and it's a cliche, but it's definitely true. And you feel it a ton if you're a public figure, which is the people who rip on you and are down on you, you hear and feel it a million times more than all the compliments in the world.
You were very clear that, and you like making this explicit, you were fired from Facebook.
Correct. And I thank you for calling out that. I'd like to make it clear. I'm not trying to make myself overly victimized here, but there's so many times where executives are pushed out of their own companies, and then everyone agrees to play by the rules. I mean, you've seen this.
Totally.
They've decided to spend more time with their family.
VC's
They're
the same way, by the
excited
way.
to move on to the next great adventure. I think that is not a healthy thing. I think it's not a productive thing. I would like to see the industry be more honest about this, if only because it minimizes we all hear about the successful acquisitions. We all hear about the ones that go well and how they made the money and how it's great. But then the other side of it, the part where they potentially are getting forced out of their companies, where control is seized beyond the limits of what was agreed, those parts often get smoothed over by the corporate messaging. And the problem is then future people deciding what they're going to do with their company only see that positive side. And they don't understand. They don't have the real world experience to know that things don't always or even often go that way. So I think it's productive for people to see both sides of the coin. The Oculus story, I would hope that people could learn something from not just the good parts of what happened, but the bad.
It's actually kind of hard to find a canonical record of like what even kind of transpired that's synthesized in a way. So let me do it in my words, and
all right,
you correct me on anything that you want to.
All right, let's do it.
So you gave $9,000 to a pro-Trump political organization called Nimble America. It was a self-described social welfare 501c4 nonprofit.
That's right.
With a goal to shitpost for Donald Trump it was for a broad set of candidates against Hillary Clinton, I guess, theoretically, because that's the structure of the 501c4 or whatever, but like for Donald Trump. And the
specifically to bring shit posting to the real world was I think the quote there.
Got it.
People always they quote shit post out of there, and then they say, oh, that means that he was trying to flood the internet with memes and posts. Like, well, no, actually, in fact, they explicitly were saying it's shit posting, but not in that venue.
Yes.
Which was very frustrating for me at the time.
And so the distinction you're drawing is like not just doing digital ads of shit posts.
Well, it's not even just doing digital ads. All they did was run a physical billboard.
I was going to get there. One, and so that was the distinction you were drawing was, so ultimately what happened.
And in the description of the organization, they're making that distinction.
Yeah, got it.
If you were doing it on the internet, you would just be a shit posting organization.
Yeah.
You just wouldn't say our goal is to bring shit posting into real life.
Yep. And so there was one billboard that was run. It said "Too big to jail" for Hillary Clinton.
Yeah, it was a picture of Hillary Clinton alongside the text too big to jail.
Too big to jail. And so there was one billboard that...
Referring at the time to, at the time that it came out, this was when there was a lot of controversy about handling of classified material and whether or not she was being treated the way that other people had been treated by the legal system for handling data in similar ways.
And so how it came to be is interesting for journalists, journalistic integrity and all that, that you were ultimately tied up in all this. And I think that's a interesting thing if people really care about how it came to be. But you did not, your original intention wasn't to be public with this, right?
No.
It was the founders, I think, of the sub forum or
not even the founders. They just used to be moderators
of them.
Yeah, that's the thing. They weren't even moderators. They at one point were moderators of the subreddit for like the de facto subreddit for the Trump campaign,
which has ultimately got banned by Reddit. And I don't even really know
years later,
2020, I think. And some of the stuff that at least the Daily Beast article that was the big one that broke out said was to become maybe it was a moderator. It said, is there a difference between white nationalism and white supremacy? Was 9/11 an inside job?
So the interesting thing there, you're right. They mentioned, it's this horrible place. For example, they ask you had to answer if 9/11 was an inside job, but they don't say what the right answer was. And the thing is, those questions, they imply that you basically had to be a crazy conspiracy nutter in order to even be allowed in. It was actually the opposite. They implemented those questions to keep out all of the nutters that were trying to become moderators. Like if you said 9/11 was the inside job, you were not allowed to become a moderator. They basically said, okay, yeah, that's like, if you think that the US government did this, you should not be moderating this political forum for a current U.S. president, and so that was the actual really interesting thing, is how they actually completely flipped it by acting like you had to answer one way, and in fact it was the other way. They were trying to filter out exactly the people they're implying they were.
That's interesting. So this ultimately came out through some very weird series of events that Daily Beast, it seems like, didn't respect journalistic integrity behind verifying things off the record.
That's right.
Was at least the way.
Well, they confirmed in writing that it would be off the record.
Yeah.
And then later, when I pointed that out, the editor said, "Oh no! While you were on the phone, you confirmed that it would be on the record."
Yeah.
It's like wait. That's not how any of this works.
Sure. Yeah.
Why would I have done such a thing?
That's what. Yeah. It's actually the Occam's razor of this situation is like, why would that have been how you would want to reveal, in this big breaking thing? It just, whatever. It doesn't
and people do make mistakes being on the record, off the record. It happens, especially when they're not familiar with the rules.
Yes.
Or journalism. Remember, I went to journalism school. I was a journalist. I was an editor. I very well understood the rules. I worked in the tech sector for years. I did literally thousands of interviews.
Yep.
I understood the rules, and it was in writing that it was off the record. And so they don't argue that, this was of such journalistic import that we're breaking the rules. It was just, no, you agreed on the call that it was on the record.
Yeah.
It's like, it of course was untrue.
Yeah, totally. So they did that. A bunch of controversy followed. This was prior to the actual presidential election. And
that's right.
So a bunch of Facebook
late September of 2016.
Oh wow. So
September 22nd.
Okay, got it. And so you're asked to take a leave of absence as this shitstorm is brewing. People are internally within Facebook signing different things, and game studios are saying like, we might not work with Facebook.
So actually, that's another bit of misinformation. There were a lot of headlines that said game studios are dropping support for Oculus until they remove Palmer Luckey. So there were 3 companies that said on their Twitter that they were not going to work with Oculus until the situation resolved. They didn't actually say that they needed to fire me. One of them was a paper trading card game company that later said that the whole thing was just a joke. They're like, no, we thought it was a joke. We said we're dropping Oculus support. We literally make paper trading cards. The joke was that we were dropping.
And
support.
you're like, ha ha ha.
Okay, so
thanks for that.
So that's one of them. And then the other 2 had never released a game. And in fact, neither of them ever released anything. They were 2 independent solo developers who never released the games they were working on, which they weren't Oculus partners. They hadn't even been approved to be on our store. How could they be dropping support for us when, in fact, we had no relationship with them, had no plans of hosting their game one way or the other? But instead, people turned into this huge thing. Like developers are dropping support for Oculus, which really bothered me because, as a business guy, that's an accusation of material impact, saying his actions had a material impact on the Oculus business. And it was just completely false. Not a single developer we had ever worked with did anything of the sort.
And so how much, like, at that
Or if you really want to go the other way, every single developer we worked with kept working with us despite the controversy.
Yeah.
Which, I don't know if you can say that, lack of action is an affirmative action, but if you're going to skew it that one way, the way to skew it is every single partner we had stood with us.
How much of after all that stuff happened, then it starts brewing on itself? And I've never been.
It's worth noting because for people who aren't listening, or for who haven't followed this, like I gave money to this, and what the report said is that I was funding anti-Semitic, racist, white supremacist troll farms that were attacking Clinton supporters all over the internet on Facebook and Twitter and posting these vile, horrible memes all over the place. So I just want to make clear, the thing that I was getting attacked for was not what I did. It was, I did one thing. It was reported as a completely different thing. And all the controversy was in response to that.
Did the Daily Beast, so the Daily Beast reported that?
So that's actually the other interesting thing. The Daily Beast did not report any of these things. Now, what they did is they did like what I talked about earlier, where they implied that you had to support white nationalism in order to be a mod. They implied you had to think 9/11 was an inside theory, but they didn't actually explicitly say it. They just did it so that any reasonable person would read it and assume much worse. The other articles were actually the ones that were much worse. So the Daily Beast, for all of the journalistic malpractice they engaged in, they were not the ones who actually elevated these claims to saying, he's funding Donald Trump's anti-Semitic meme machine. He's flooding the internet with Nazi propaganda. Like, those were just made up by other outlets like Wired and Washington Post and the New York Times and Boing Boing. I mean, like the gamut of credible to non-credible. It was all completely false reporting.
I even talked a lot about sort of how the sort of moment when I was forced out of the company, but there was this board meeting, and at the board meeting, Andreessen Horowitz, Lars and Ben, tried to convince me to stay on. They wanted me to stay on the board. They wanted me to stay on and run product. And I sort of said, look, I had this experience at my last company when I left, of being sort of like demoted, but kind of like still hanging out. And it was not a positive experience for me. The company before Zenefits. Yeah. And so I said, look, if I'm out, I'm out. I remember like in that board meeting, they said, well, what are you going to do? And I said, well, I think I'm going to start another company. And Lars looked at me and he said, you don't have another company in you. Like, there's just no way. Like, I know when people have another company in them, and like, you don't have it in you. And I agreed to step down under a lot of pressure at the board meeting, and we drafted this press release that was a friendly press release. It was like, I said, great things about David, and they said good things about me, and like, sort of the kind of anodyne sort of stuff that people say normally when people leave companies that are like, like new leadership needed for whatever reason. And there was this sort of agreement that we were all going to kind of march forward arm in arm over this transition. And David just issued a different press release, like literally just a different release than the one that we had agreed to.
Like right after that?
Like the day I signed the paperwork on a Monday. And on a Monday afternoon, like a few hours later, the release came out and it was not the one that we had drafted. And the release was like, look, the company has all these compliance problems and it's all because this fucking guy doesn't care about compliance.
And so just to level set the personalities, I realize most people probably know this, but David Sachs was your COO.
Yep.
Who's now a media personality himself, as well as started Craft Ventures. Lars Dahlgaard was the former CEO of Success Factors, who was your board member
from Andreessen
and
Horowitz.
Ben Horowitz was obviously Horowitz of
Andreessen Horowitz, yeah.
And so was that, did the Andreessen Horowitz guys know that he was going to do that? He was your COO. He was going to he stepped into interim CEO. Was that the original title?
Yeah. So the original, what Andreessen Horowitz pitched me on in that board meeting was that, David would step in for 6 to 12 months. They were like, look, there are these compliance issues. we want David to come in for 6 to 12 months and, clean this stuff up, turn sales around. Like sales were really sort of, starting to collapse. And then in 6 to 12 months, we're going to bring you back as CEO. And like, that was sort of what was pitched at the board meeting. I was like, I don't know if I believe that, but that was like sort of what they sort of like laid out on the table. It was a very friendly conversation agreement until the day that it got announced. And so it's when I talk about this mostly to emphasize just the level of like horror that I saw, like when this stuff did in fact come out, because it was not what I was expecting when I resigned.
And the compliance stuff, and I don't need you to go down the whole rabbit hole of this, but there was elements of that was known to the board, right? And there was some stuff that was, people kind of knew that, hey, these people were licensed in some states, but not the other, and we probably have to pay a fine for it. But there was a level of, it wasn't you were hiding this from the entire company or something.
Yeah, no, there were a few different things that came out, like at least in the media about Zenefits, and one was this sort of licensing compliance issue. And like broadly speaking, and there were a few exceptions, but for the most part, reps were properly licensed in their home state, and they weren't licensed in other states around the country, and they weren't licensed in other states largely because like we didn't think that they had to be, and we got that advice repeatedly and in writing from our lawyers on this. And look, as CEO of the company, I own those mistakes.
Sure.
But there's a very different sort of moral character, I think, to like, hey, we made a mistake and we screwed this up because we didn't realize what was required, and like setting out to sort of like subvert like the regulatory regime, which was like never the intention. It was just a pure mistake. But that, that like I was never allowed to say that. That was like, and the company was and like under David was extremely set on me not being able to say like what I just told you.
Yeah.
And in fact, so set on it that I would meet with regulators and the company would send their lawyer, and their lawyer's job, their only job was that when I was asked, well, so like, why weren't people licensed? They would sort of say, look, objection, that's attorney-client privilege communication. The company owns that privilege, not Parker. And so we don't want him answering the question. And I was told I couldn't answer it. And what was literally not allowed to sort of say, what I thought was sort of exculpatory, at least from like a motives perspective. Why they did that, like, I don't know, like, did like A16Z, did they know that David was going to go down this path? I sort of have to imagine that Andreessen Horowitz did not realize that David was, I think he sort of decided to burn the company to the ground so that he could come out of that situation as the white knight of compliance, Mr. sort of compliance, and go on and raise his VC fund, which worked out extremely well for him. David used to have this like sort of way of talking about this. Like there's this great slide that he had at TechCrunch Disrupt when he was being interviewed by Connie Laszlos. And the slide had these like 3 bullet points. And the bullet point 1 was like, it's no secret that Zenefits has a bunch of compliance issues. Bullet point 2 was like, the culture of the sales organization was broken. And bullet point 3 was, the sales organization reported to Parker, not to me. And the implication, the inference, I would even say the lie in that slide was that all of the compliance issues were on the sales team. And actually, like something like 70% of the licensing violations were actually on the account management team that reported directly to David and happened while he was running it. And that never came out. And David managed to never have that show up anywhere in the media. Like, look, I own, I'm just equally responsible for the account management team as anything else. But it really it always sort of really grinded my gears that, David was out there attacking me for these licensing violations most of which happened on his team on his watch while he was there as COO.
I put my house on the blockchain and then I can borrow against it.
Yeah. You can put your house on the blockchain, borrow against it, which again, like here actually is, like a lot of the use cases are like, well, imagine that you're in a place where, inflation is super high. And so this is
okay. But let's just do that one because that's my favorite one. I put my house on the blockchain, which doesn't really mean anything because you can't physically put it on the blockchain. And then somebody lends me whatever, 500,000 USDC or some stable coin. And then I take it and I buy some ridiculous NFT of Logan. It's probably worth 600,000 or something.
Yeah, a lot.
And then it goes to zero because they actually look at it. And now you need the money, right? Because you lent me that $500,000. I'm just like working this through. Like you lent me the $500,000 because my digital house was on the blockchain. And then you say, okay, Zach, that Logan thing was pretty stupid. I need your house. This is the record of your house that I own. And then I say, no. What do? You show up to the sheriff's department and you like, look at this like piece of cryptography that says I own this house. Like what, like, that's what I mean. Like, what does that even mean? How do you get the house?
I think there's two separate things here. What I think you're saying implies that like the law never touches crypto and there's like this whole separate universe. Same thing that would happen if you took out a mortgage and didn't pay would happen. You'd get repossessed.
Right.
Same thing would happen here.
Because the bank owns like the title to the house and I've signed a bunch of legal documents showing that I've given them that. And those legal documents are basically what you're saying is we're going to recreate the entire system and just have a public record of it. That's all. That's like, to me, that's exactly what, wherever you walk these ideas through, it always ends up with like,
oh, that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying like right now you go to a Bank of America or wherever else. In this case, you might tap into a wider pool of borrowers who or lenders in this case, get a lower cost of capital, not negotiate with the same bank and be able.
Why would I get a lower cost of capital from a random person versus a massive bank like Wells Fargo?
Well, you wouldn't, it'd be from a pool of people. I don't know.
Yeah. It's like, it's just, it doesn't work. Like,
but I don't think it doesn't.
I'm all for like the technology is cool, but like there's no, as you work the idea through, the minute you put an on real asset on chain, you realize, oh, right. Like the only reason I can borrow against these real assets is because there is a document that the US court system will enforce.
There's a document in this case too here, and there's no reason that the US court system wouldn't enforce it. It's a smart contract as opposed to like a ream of papers or an online document.
But then what makes it smart? The whole point of a smart contract is that the computer can do everything. And here what you're saying is I've got to now take this contract to the US court system. I have to prove that I own it. I need the sheriff to then show up and get me out. You've just recreated the entire mortgage infrastructure that already exists today.
On the blockchain.
But that exactly. Right. It's like, and then I'm lost as to like why the on the blockchain part matters. Besides, basically what everyone means is they mean, oh, I want a public record of the transaction. Okay, right? Like, sure, that's the thing you're looking for. But ultimately, every other step in the process is essentially the exact same thing you have to do in the real world. Yeah, I mean, so first of all, I mean, it was great. There's a lot of different like interesting use cases to go through, and I think one of the challenges classically with analyzing crypto is like a lot of times people describe crypto as the features that it has, right? It does these things or it has these properties, but a little bit less of the like utility for a person or a company. And so part of the challenge in general with these things, I think, is just like breaking out the use cases. And as an example, right? Like Bitcoin is its own thing. And I think like generally speaking, Bitcoin should be talked about as its own like topic, like just Bitcoin. I actually would really love to go back to Bitcoin at some point because you mentioned you're a long-term holder as a store of value. And I have some like questions on the math there. But first on just like the state money.
I think I'm a speculative store of value long-term holder. So yeah, let's definitely discuss that.
Yeah. Well, what is speculation without like some sort of, future expected returns at some point? Do you want to talk about Bitcoin or the state money thing? Because I think they're both interesting.
Let's do both. Why don't you guide? Yeah, no, I'm interested in hearing.
Well, so just on the Bitcoin one, so you talked about, your bull case on Bitcoin is essentially as a store of value. We'll talk, maybe it becomes a payment thing, and we can talk about when and why. I don't think that's likely. But Bitcoin as a store of value is kind of like the bull case for holding it. Is this, just so I understand, is this like the digital gold theory essentially?
Essentially, yeah. It is effectively that no single, that it's it is inflationary, but in a predictable way with a limited ultimate supply. And, it can't be changed. Like, it's basically the only money on earth where you can predictably say that the policy, it hasn't since its genesis, and there have been wars trying to change it, and it hasn't. And that, you can have pretty reasonable confidence, and it becomes more Lindy that the monetary policy won't change as it continues to grow. The key there, though, is that you have to have a continuous supply of people who believe in that, right? For there to be demand to buy it.
Right. Well, it's just like supply and demand. So we're saying in a sense that like the Bitcoin bull case from here is it replaces some percentage of the gold market cap, if you will, right? As like digital version of where people would store their money as an alternative to gold.
I mean, I think there's a scenario where it exceeds it, that like every new person being born is probably not, is a net new Bitcoin buyer versus a net new gold buyer. So over like a long-term horizon. But for that to happen, it probably needs to be more useful than something you just store in a cold wallet and don't ever use. People are trying to do that with like Lightning Network for payments. We're going to need more products that allow for the financialization of Bitcoin. Like today, I can't really use it very easily in a secure manner as, collateral for loans and things like that. I think those things have to happen for the Bitcoin bull case to continue to play out, and they haven't yet.
Yeah, I think it's fair to say that like Bitcoin as a utility, like I can use it and spend it, proactively is probably, I mean, you said it best, right? That's still highly speculative. If we just do this is my like digital coin challenge with this, digital gold challenge with this. So gold has been around as a global store of value culturally for what, 3,000 years, 2,000 years, something along those lines. So we have like history and wars and regime changes where gold has, matured. So the gold market cap today, if you look up all the gold in the world, essentially is about 10 trillion, give or take, right? Depending on the day. So it's about a $10 trillion market cap that has evolved over about 3,000 years as a store of value. And I agree, it's hard to buy gold, although actually most people don't actually hold the gold. They hold paper that represents the gold, but we can leave that aside for 1 second. So if we say like the bull case for Bitcoin is that it takes some percentage of the gold market, because good luck trying to replace this store of value that's existed for 2,000 years, like from before Jesus. So Bitcoin's current market cap is what? Something like 800 billion, a trillion, something along those lines?
Yeah, so the store value bull case is only like to your point, it's only a 5 to 10x from here. I do believe, unlike you, that there is a world in which gold definitely not, in which Bitcoin, because it's easier to transport, it's, easier to divide, that it does become a medium of exchange, but it needs to move to a much larger scale and a significantly lower volatility for that to happen. I'm not the biggest Bitcoin bull in the world. So in other words, I'm not somebody who says, hey, Bitcoin, like I read Michael Saylor, it goes to 0 or it goes to 1 million. I'm not one of those folks, right? I would say the upside is, to your point, on a expected value basis, probably, fairly capped.
Yeah, I think that's like, to me, if the digital gold argument is always a challenge, because if you say, all right, let's give this scenario the upside that it's like half the global value, like it splits the market with gold, which is, we're talking about something evolving over 3,000 years versus like 10. So let's say over a 30-year window of time, Bitcoin incrementally takes over this digital gold use case, because right now that's the only real use case for it, to your point.
At scale, yeah. That's why the bulk of people are holding it. I think a true like Bitcoin believer, and I'm kind of a tepid one, would say, well, again, it's kind of a chaos play, a schmuck insurance play, like when I originally bought, and it's to say that fiat currency just goes off a cliff, and that people actually, that even the gold market, by the way, could grow beyond its current level, and that Bitcoin could as well, because fiat money, which is relatively new, hundreds of years old at scale, finally just fails an experiment. Again, that's an extreme case, but that's the one that you get from the Bitcoin.
If that happens, we have bigger challenges, because there are people with guns without governments. Yeah.
I do want to just close that though real quick. So I would say most Web3 believers, I'm actually probably one of the few who feels like still Bitcoin is important to the success of Web3 because it's the cryptocurrency that most people reference. And I don't think it will have failed if it does increase by 10x, if the market cap gets to 8 to 10 trillion. And I'd love to see that and think it's important. And I think it's probable that it does. I do think it gets bigger than gold. I don't think many people who are entering the markets today have the memory that you just talked about like Bitcoin's already at $1 trillion. I don't know how long it took gold in its first 10 years, to get there. But I would just argue that I think I'm one of the few folks who think Bitcoin is important to Web3 success because it references people's opinion and perception of crypto overall.
I've never really seen anything like it. We've talked about this, but I almost feel like most companies struggle with the ability to ship the product, and then like the communication to their customers is the easy part. I feel like you guys ship products so quickly. Communicating to the customers is like actually hey, we do all these things now, right? And they're like, didn't you just email me last week? But how have you set up a culture that it enables that level of product velocity, right? Are these discrete teams that are operating autonomously and sort of acting as GMs? Like, how do you hire people that can successfully ship things quickly, and how do you get product into the wild as fast as you do?
Super good. So I think there's two sets of it. So one is I think it's a funky product of the history from Paribus to Ramp, which we'll go into. And I think that the other is by focusing a lot on getting process really tight, iterating on that, and then measuring the days and constraining it. The set of problems were the two things. So first, just the history of it. And so I met Will Hockey, who started Column a couple months ago. And I think one of the things we bonded over was
former founder of Plaid.
And one of the things we bonded over was for both Plaid and for Paribus, our company, one of the engineering and product problems that we had was many people that we were building integrations into did not want us there. And so it could be as simple as we'd have to go and to check the price at a retailer. Maybe the retailer didn't want scraping to be going on.
JetBlue's like, fuck off, right? Like, leave us alone right now.
Or the marketing team just changed the email receipt because they can do that. Yeah. And it meant that you would be building constantly on Quicksand. And a lot of the upbringing was you're fighting for your life. 2%, 3% of what you would ship would break every single week. And so a lot of it was, how do you build things really quickly and in a modular way so you could switch parts out? It was just for years and years and years was a lot of it, which sure out, probably made us a little bit of crazy and bizarre engineers, but it helped us later when we're starting.
I'm sure you guys have a lot of PTSD from things going down in the middle of the night or whatever and needing to fix it as well.
And it's so lucky. I'm really happy that Visa isn't just nope, never mind.
Exactly. Thankfully, you can afford a therapist to sort through all the anxieties that came from that. But I can only imagine.
So a lot of it's that, and then a lot of it too is okay, there's this large market. What we'd observed to at Capital One was it was very hard, mostly for perceived regulatory risk. I think in 99% of cases, it really wasn't real. It just was processes to really cover the other 1%. Things were really slow. And so the question was, how could you, in a space that dealt with real regulatory concerns, as well as we were going to move lots of money, how could we isolate the processes that we take for product development and make sure they're applied correctly? And so there's a part of the Ramp engineering product team that, let's say, deals with credit card transactions where, if that breaks, it's not funny. People's credit cards all break. You can't just have it go down 1% of the time. And for that, it's all about correctness, low latency, extreme level of testing. And that actually ships quite slow. There's another and a very large part of our products where if it's down for a little bit, a front end page, like it can be down for a couple of minutes, bring it back up. And there's lots of things, and you might measure maybe only 2% of people, 0.5% of people might go on. It's a small number at the start, but for those areas, it's all around designing. First, just sprints where the is you're going to move very, very quickly. You're going to set at the start what are you going to get done, move through, retro the things before, and increase sort of the speed that you're moving progressively. And we try to have most of our engineering, and especially the things that we're building in house and not relying on APIs for, really move super rapidly. And that's what allows us to just spin up not just cards, bill payments, expense management, and really replace full sets of what at other companies are full products or companies with just add-ons. We try to run those in those sets of teams, but separate the duties out would be last. And I think last is just like anything. The more you can set standards around process and then tweak what works progressively, that works.
So obviously you were baptized. I always joke that like B2B is easy mode compared to being a consumer app team. Like people get very, very mad at you. B2B customers are like, I'm going to churn in 3 months. Consumer customers are like, what the fuck are you doing? Like whatever, I'm trying to get on this flight and you messed this up. So no, that all makes sense. And then setting the process and expectations, and some things can go fast, some things don't. What about from a team standpoint? Like how do you actually delegate the responsibilities of these things? I mean, Ramp's a very integrated product, but has modular elements of it, and not everyone's buying 100% of all those things. And so do you have GMs that sort of own and operate autonomously? Is there like teams that are working on this and they're sort of scrum teams and this is the new initiative, and then they go around and they're the entrepreneurial people that you just go point at problems? Is it a hybrid?
I mean, so the first time around with Paribus, engineering sat with Kareem and Gene. Marketing and product sat with me. Design. And I think one of the best things that we did this time was actually flip it. And so with Ramp, Kareem oversees the majority of the headcount by a lot of engineering, of product, of design, and data science. And the way that we think about it is things of structure, things that are being repeated multiple times over are going to sort of multiply out and cascade throughout the product suite. Put these together and have folks essentially work in pods. And I think that the complexity of this has grown over time, but in general, even against it, where at the start it might have been effectively one team, a few different threads, but effectively very, one or a few very small teams, to now multiple teams where it either could be, one person on product, maybe 6 engineers, maybe one person on design. There's rough ratios, and depending on the certain group that you're in. And effectively, we have backlogs. The nice thing about being in B2B is customers will tell you, like, if you just ship this, we'll use it. And so you can actually quantify, like, against all the different needs, have a long backlog and prioritize what takes a small amount of work, unlocks a lot of spend, simple feature that unlocks lots of future things. And we try to build like a car, not a faster horse kind of a thing. Effectively, cascade and run it against it. And so the structure has evolved over time, but I think one of the best things we did this time was keeping the people who were functionally building. And now actually to the earlier question you'd ask of like, how do we market these things when product moves so quickly? We recently moved product marketing to work with product and to be closer to the sense of build, but things of structure that you need to have clear view and cascade out, we try to put together.
I think this is the fun part. The fun part is not us sitting in this room speculating about what will or won't happen, but the state of the world 10 or 20 or 30 years from now when we see whether there's true adoption. And so a lot of the reason why crypto was invented was as an insurance policy against centralized forces. So if you're not on some level cynical about the way the world is going, that you don't see a certain amount of like corruption in data oligopolies like Google and Facebook and Microsoft, that you don't see that the federal government is implementing more and more controls on individual liberties. Like, again, I'm not saying I'm like a capital L, extreme libertarian, but you have to have a belief that, number one, more and more security issues are going to happen, right? There's going to be more and more restrictions on your financial freedoms. And number two, that more and more of our lives are going to go onto digital rails. So like part of, I think, the frustration of people when we talk about use cases is I kind of immediately go to like, yeah, we are actually going to eventually live in the metaverse. You already spend a huge amount of your time online, a huge amount of what you care about, your loved ones, your career, your output, like think about GitHub, your financial activity, the things that you purchase are already happening on digital rails. I'm not saying metaverse, like you're going to like put on some freaking VR goggles and you're going to become a lizard. I'm saying that our lives are going online. And so crypto is just a way to say, when you get to that state and your lives are online, they will not be controlled by central entities.
But that's the part that I just think isn't true. And it depends on who you define as like central entity, because I do think we have to distinguish between a government, which has power and authority and guns, which is very different from a Google and a Facebook, which obviously are subject to like regulations and laws. And I think sometimes for whatever reason in the discussion, people seem to conflate these two things because they're just like big and like, we don't like them because they're big for some reason. The government one, let's leave Google and Facebook aside for 1 second.
Sure.
The government one doesn't hold any weight, in my opinion, because ultimately you still live in a country, whether it's the United States or we talked about Iran in the previous one, or maybe you live in Venezuela, wherever it may be, where you are ultimately, and the businesses you interact with are ultimately subject to those local rules or lack thereof. And as a result, the local military. And so I always struggle with like, okay, at some point, I need to turn this digital thing I own into fiat, right? I have to like actually use my local currency in some way, or I have to interact with a business in my local country who needs to eventually get to local fiat. And that's where the government immediately can step in because they can always show up with their guns. So I just never understood like how this trustless, permissionless money actually plays out specifically in the government use case. So we can leave the Googles aside for a second. Like, can't they always just show up and take it from you?
So, I mean, it depends on how extremist you want to get, but there's this book, Sovereign Individual, which looks very cynically at a long-term vision of individuals, like the founder of Uniswap, Hayden Adams is a good example, who can write 25 lines of code and create billions of dollars of value, going and shopping around the world for governments who are willing to offer them protection for some rate, right? And so it is a technology that arms individuals for greater negotiating power over extractive sovereigns. And so if you don't believe in that, if you don't think there will be a huge amount of production by essentially like a small, techno, crypto, these folks who create tons of value on digital rails, if you don't think it's important that happens, if you're not one of those people, then you might be like, this doesn't affect me. And you may be right.
I don't think like really smart people who are trying to make tons of money are going to be like, in order for me to do this, I have to move to like the middle of Micronesia where the government has recruited me by saying, promise us, or I'm promising you we're not going to show up with guns.
But it's already happening, right? It's already happening. People are already shopping. How many of your friends have moved to Miami or Austin? You think they just did it for the weather? No, they're shopping. They're shopping for regimes where they pay a lower tax rate. Now, I know that sounds like,
yeah, but that
really
has nothing to do with like permissionless money. Like, yeah, they go for lower tax rate on their dollars. Not like, this isn't like they can go show up in Bitcoin and start spending Bitcoin without the US government having controls over it. It just doesn't work.
Okay, but that's not actually, let's think about what Bitcoin offers you, right? Think about capital controls. I spent 1.5 years of my life in China, and China as a sovereign, they're very savvy. They're like, once you create value here, you ain't leaving. We're keeping a lock between these four walls. So think about Bitcoin in that case, where I can hold a pointer to an online address, which is on a USB key, it's on a ledger, or it's on a hardware wallet. And now that capital comes with me, right? My net worth, wherever it is, it's first of all, 100% uptime. I can carry that to wherever I want to go.
If you flee the country, and this is the one use case I actually do agree with you on, which is like in the sovereign money or lack thereof, I guess, which is in the 48 hours in which you want to leave this country and get out. And by the way, never come back, because you come back and it's not going to be a good situation. You can put as much Bitcoin as you possibly can get, which is another issue of like, how do you get it in the first place, given you're probably paid sovereignly. But yes, if you have exclusively digital assets and you want to flee the country in 48 hours, yeah, 100%. Bitcoin's pretty good. The alternative these days is essentially like diamonds, right? Like the most concentrated form of wealth pre-Bitcoin is basically a diamond. Beyond that, like flee the country, China and others have quite a bit of control. And I think this is like one of these false assumptions that people make, which is, well, if I'm like an independent citizen, like I'm not subject to the rules. China, the best example I actually think is them, which is back in early 2021, I think it was, they basically banned Bitcoin mining. They're just like, no more Bitcoin mining. Which they obviously can't actually control necessarily, like from a technical perspective, but they can do it from a legal perspective.
Yes.
And what is the current mining business in China? I think it's zero, right?
Yeah, it's zero.
Yeah. So like, there's your best example of like where the limitations are. But yes, like flee the country, take your money. I'm with you there.
So let's do, we've somehow managed to make it an hour without doing Web3 and what you're up to today. So you now have a new company in the broader ad tech Web3 world?
So you've caught me unprepared because, yes, a round has mostly closed, but I actually haven't publicly announced it. So I guess this is the official.
Yeah, good.
This is
you went on Rogan, then you came on here, equally big platforms, podcasts, I know you were debating which one to launch the company on, but.
Yeah, no, clearly that, but I obviously chose Logan for
yeah, exactly.
Yep.
However much you can talk about, or you're talking about the company specifically, or what led you into Web3. You obviously have a pretty good understanding of how the Web2 world works, at least these social media giants. And you guys, the two of you have had some, I think either good sport or snippy, depending on people's view back and forth about some of this stuff. So what led you down the path to it, and what do you kind of believe about Web3?
Yeah, so I was not an early crypto adopter. I think like everyone in Web3, there's like the one that got away. There was like a super crypto bull at Facebook when I was there, and he like told me to buy Bitcoin. I think when it was like at $10 or something. And I remember at the time, Coinbase limited your purchases to like $100 or something. And so and I just didn't want to deal with the hassle of like buying Bitcoin. And so I didn't buy as much as I should have. So there's definitely a little bit of a FOMO feel around.
You wait long enough though, it could be back. You could get another $10 opportunity.
The market will fluctuate, as Jake used to say. But no, I guess I got kind of sort of crypto pilled by some big names and VCs in crypto today that I just know more personally than anything else. And they got me thinking about it. And I basically asked myself two questions. One, what in Web 2 could actually be defensively rebuilt along sort of crypto blockchain lines? Like starting from zero, what would you rebuild along those lines? And then two, looking at Web 3, what is completely and totally missing from this world that should exist? And the answer to both questions was the same, which is attribution, which if you're not familiar, I know it sounds very wonky and almost academic. It's basically it's a technology that more or less gets telemetry from the user touch points, like the ad click, the ad view, you installed the app, you did this thing in the app, you didn't do this thing in the app, you disappeared. And you sort of thread it together into a causal chain out of the chaos of data that's hitting you. And you figure out, it turns out, because, life on the internet is complicated. You see a YouTube video and you see an 8 Sleep ad, because I just see 8 Sleep ads all the time, right? You read an interview with Nadeau about it, and then at some point you buy the damn thing. And so it's like, okay, phenomenologically, how did causally I get to the point where I bought this like cooled mattress thing? It's like, well, was it the video? Was it this? Was it the billboard or something else? And so attribution is what helps you solve that problem. And if you look at attribution platforms like my former employer, Branch, or other ones like AppFlyer, Adjust, whatever, it's got competitors. They effectively function as kind of, semi-public, somewhat decentralized ledgers, right? They're a central point. They're sort of a database that says, well, you know what? This got 4 impression views on Facebook and 5 video views on YouTube and this other thing, and then this other thing happened, and this is how we think the causal chain held together, at least in theory. In actual practice, it's a lot less subtle and complex than that for a bunch of reasons that are probably not worth going into here. But that's what I thought was kind of interesting. And so it's probably no secret. I've been publishing on Substack about Web3 ideas and attribution and what would an ad stack on Web3 look like? Well, big reveal, that's actually what we're working on. So that those two posts are basically the VC pitch that I raised on in essay form.
Is the idea as like people's Web3 interactions, if you will, happen on like different chains and different platforms, and like how do you find the same human, or what we believe might be the same human across these? Is that the kind of like the general theme?
That's one of the challenges. I mean, identity is fragmented on Web3. I mean, it is on Web2 as well. When we started Facebook Exchange, we discovered that every Facebook user ID had an average of 4 devices. And this was like 2013. It's probably even higher now. And so identity is very fragmented, which makes attribution and targeting very difficult. So that's definitely one of the challenges, Zach. But more broadly, like, let's just think about what's a basic question a Web3 company would ask themselves, right? Like, Web3 already has ads, by the way, if you define ads loosely enough. So like an NFT.
Well, the first thing I would probably ask myself is, what am I doing here? And is anyone actually going to buy this? But after I get through that question, I convince myself there's something here. Go on.
Okay, but what's question number 2 or 3? Question number 2 or 3 would be, what's my retention rate? What is the ROI on that token drop that I just did, right? Or that liquidity, providing bonus that I gave you for, injecting liquidity into my decentralized exchange, right? What is the ROI on that? What are my CACs? Let's say I have a conventional Web2 ads buy for some Web3 game. What was the acquisition cost? What was the long-term, what was the actual long-term monetization? You can't answer those questions right now with the tooling there is no tooling basically in Web3. And so the most basic metrics are basically unanswerable questions right now.
Is that because you show an ad in, I hate the term Web 2 because it's really like the web. You show an ad on the web and then somebody comes and has like an interaction in the app, the decentralized game, let's call it as the example. It's a good one. Like I've got to link those 2 events, if you will, like the history of the events together and do some sort of like data science-y work on I did A, did B. That's the theme.
Yeah. There's a total identity. You mentioned ATT earlier, right? The example of Apple basically turning off the device ID for third-party advertisers on the iPhone. Why does that matter? Well, identity is the primary key that everyone in this kind of fragmented right ecosystem use to refer to each other to calculate things like ROIs, right? And if that doesn't exist or that's fragmented, then it's very difficult to do that. And then and this isn't by design, it's 2 different forms of the web interacting with each other. How do you sync that Facebook, campaign ID or that web browser cookie with the wallet that 2 months later actually bought the NFT? There's no way to actually systematically join that.
I cannot believe I'm going to say this out loud, but that's actually like a pretty good startup idea. Like,
wow. There's space in the round. We'll let in a little friends and family check. I'd be proud to have the biggest Web3 troll in the round.
Well, let me tell
ultimate victory.
Let me tell you why I like it. Because everybody always thinks I hate everything. And it's like, I don't hate everything because I hate it. Like, I am a startup person. All I do is actually like put money in high risk technology stuff. Like, if anything, I'm probably like one of the people who likes these kind of like cockamamie ideas more than anyone else. I just don't like when they're not based in logic and reality and like human behavior. But here, what you've got, which I agree with, like with one giant caveat, is like common advertising and usage metrics and dashboards for a company that operates in Web3, because like the underlying data that they have in their normal web environment is different, right? It's a different set of like interaction points. The way the data is captured is different. The way you have to do analytics on it is different. And most of these companies are too busy trying to figure out a business model to actually do the underlying like analytics work themselves. And so there's your gap. I think that's right. Like, it makes a ton of sense because it's not our frame at Operator when we do investing in technology, in crypto, whatever, is like, does this make sense as an enterprise software company? And it has nothing to do with like web, would this be an enterprise software that a company would buy? And it does make sense to me that a Web3 customer would pay for this because they are unlikely to be able to build this internally unless they were really, really big.
That's exactly right, Zach.
Yeah.
And I think it's well timed, right? Because crypto winter has shown us that token does not always go up. And a lot of these products were actually sort of Ponzi schemes or speculative vehicles. Yeah. But and again, who cares about your CAC if money is free and token always go up? But when suddenly token doesn't always go up, you have to worry about acquisition costs and unit economics. And so this is an engine to actually measure that and hopefully create like an actual legit user acquisition machine for.
Sam, okay, for 1 second, just please.
Well, I feel the same way, man. I'm just as frustrated here. Like, I just don't understand why this is so difficult.
Primarily because I can't actually finish a thought without you going on a diatribe. That's why it's so difficult. It's nothing to do with the actual ideas. It's more of your personality and general approach.
Clearly, it's clearly my demeanor.
No, that's right, actually. Okay.
Yep.
What we're saying is we would like accredited investors to be able to invest in private companies which just like
more efficiently.
How you actually convince somebody to marry you and have kids is beyond me. Like,
wow,
did you just like
ad hominem, eh?
Yeah, like
you're ad hominem. They would just like drop the pretense entirely.
I just like, it is impossible to finish a thought with you without having you interrupt for whatever belief system.
I'm trying to clarify the point.
You can't even not interrupt me commenting on you interrupting. You literally can't. I'm saying you interrupt me and then you interrupt the point that I'm making about you interrupting.
Listen, I'm actually really late to kid bedtime, so I'll let you finish your like statement and then we'll pick this up some other time.
Sam, whose fault is that? Whose fault is that?
I think this is great, guys. I thoroughly.
I apologize for the wife. Like I shouldn't have said that because I'm just so frustrated that I literally can't finish a sentence.
When you put this out, please edit that part in because I think it's an important part of the story.
Fine.
Keep going.
I truly don't care. You probably
just own it. Just own that you're in pure ad hominem land.
Yeah, I don't know if anyone will get through it because you probably interrupted that statement too. Let's talk about. We would like qualified investors, which is a subset of the market. We already said this. We have to KYC them. We have to figure out who they are. We have to know everything. There's costs associated with that.
Sure. Yep.
It is complicated. I agree. We want them to be able to purchase private assets. We want them to be able to buy stock in LLCs. I just want to be clear for 1 second. They can do this today. It's not easy. It's not easy. There's transaction costs.
Not easy.
There's transaction costs.
Mm-hmm.
There's risks.
Liquidity.
There's risk.
Limits liquidity. Limits liquidity. Can you give me limits liquidity?
Yes, it limits liquidity. Sam, it limits liquidity.
Great.
You get
and value. You give me that because of the liquidity is value, they're less valuable.
No, it limits liquidity.
Wow. Okay.
It limits liquidity.
The liquidity is abstractly a good. We did establish that.
In isolation, without taking context and anything else, it limits liquidity. Okay, maybe we can publish just this part because I only got interrupted 7 times instead of 7,000. We would like them to be able to more easily than they can today purchase access to private LLCs. And those LLCs represent some underlying business, real estate, dollar store, whatever.
And can we also acknowledge the majority of the U.S. economy?
Yeah. There's lots and lots of private businesses. Totally agree. Doctors' offices, stores, restaurants.
It's like 80%, 70 to 80% of the underlying equity value in the United States is not in public companies.
I don't know the actual number, but I know it's a big number. I agree. Yeah. There's a large number. Now, today, current world, non-crypto world, regular human world, okay? There are no reasons besides friction. What you think is friction. What do you think is friction? For me to be able to purchase an interest in a private company. I can buy a piece of my bodega. I can buy a piece of some lawyer's office. I can do all of those things. Now, obviously, I have to find it.
Yep.
The company or LLC has to share a bunch of information about.
That's your words, not mine, but we can all go with it. So keep going.
Okay. Normally, a regular investor would like to understand something about the thing they're going to.
Please move on, because we've already talked about how different investors have different thresholds, and you agree that you don't need audited financials for every.
I'm not talking about. There's some information. There's some information.
I really have to go.
There's some information that I would like to know about this company. This has nothing to do with the blockchain. Sure. Nothing to do with the blockchain, right?
Agreed.
So I've got to find the company listed somewhere. They have to share some information.
Someone has to share. I have an opinion. I have to want to buy it. Can we just say I have to want to buy it?
No, because that's not how the world works, man. We've done so many of these podcasts where it's just like me yelling like a crazy old person about use cases, which sometimes makes me feel like I'm like shouting into the abyss because I am. But like you compare and you contrast the level of specificity when you get somebody who actually knows what they're talking about, like William on the podcast, and talking about not just like the intricate nuanced details of the technology, but actually like why the customer cares and how they're going to pay for it and can do it at this like very intricate level. And then you talk to a bunch of the other like Web3 oriented founders, and it's very like, imagine a world, which is like still to this day, like I hear myself saying out loud, out of curiosity, because I have to go here. you're in financial services broadly, and obviously in the guts of the financial system from a technology standpoint. How do you take, like, what is your perspective on the crypto role, if any, in the like underlying guts of the financial system, separate from payments, separate, I guess just like your life philosophy, if you will, on the Web3?
Yeah, I mean, I think you have to break out Web3 and crypto, but I can kind of give you my hot takes on the entire thing since that's what we all want. I think crypto and Web3 is really great at one thing, which is trading and speculation. And I think as you think about the intricacies of like securities markets, think about like market makers and stuff like that and the exchanges, I think crypto and Web3 is super interesting there. And so if you want to build really good trading stuff and speculation things, I think crypto and Web3 makes a really great point. But the problem is you kind of have to boil it down and you have to say like, okay, like, and then what? Like, and so like, what are you going to trade on the thing, or the thing that you were trading, what use case does it have? And I just don't think we've answered that. And I don't know if we will answer that candidly. And so I think generally, I'll be honest, I'm a little bit more bearish. That being said, I'm a tactician. I like solving very immediate problems. I like solving very clear use cases. And I have definitely missed a lot of really interesting boats. And there's a reason I'm not an investor, because it's hard for me to say, this is what I think the world's going to be like in 25 years. And I'm going to go make a high conviction bet on these various industries. I think also where we've made a bit of a mistake in crypto is we've associated it with the internet, where people are constantly like, hey, this is the early days of the internet. And so we just have to be like super bullish on our thesis holds. But I don't think they're really students of history, which is the internet actually started the exact opposite way of crypto, which is, hey, we have this very tactical use case, which is like, we need to like communicate digitally between these academic institutions, these military institutions. It had like perfect product market fit. What it suffered from was actually distribution was bad, and there actually was a lack of vision. And so over time, people started to build up over time. And in crypto, we kind of did the opposite, which we're like, hey, we have this really compelling vision, which I agree is super compelling, which is, you don't have single party counterparties. You don't have any sort of centralized institutions. Everybody owns the thing. And then we try to back into a use case from there. And I think we just solved it wrong. And I think the other thing that we've messed up a little bit is we have kind of rebuilt, as we've started to scale crypto, we've rebuilt a lot of the problems that they were trying to solve. So if you look at everybody who's actually providing value in crypto, they're simply just centralized solutions, which is nothing wrong with that, but we've simply taken a centralized approach. And then you have to look at it and you say like, okay, like what value are we actually adding? And I don't think there is one.
If I could kiss you through the internet, I would do it right now. No, I just like, that's the thing that always drove me a little crazy. And this comes down to, I think you nailed it in terms of like the history of the internet. And it's honestly just like a phenomenal branding exercise, is this idea of like Web3 as if it's a new internet. And actually, if you look at the history of the internet, it, as you said, right, it started with this like very specific use case. And what we lacked was the 5,000 other things you could do on top. But we solved like a really very specific communication problem day zero. And that was, what we could build on top of. And here you're starting with like speculate on this thing that might have value downstream and going in the reverse order. And that tends to not find great product market fit.
I think there is value somewhere. I think there is value inside of DeFi or crypto. And I just don't think we've discovered it yet. But I think there's been a lot of charlatans in the space that I think have unfortunately kind of misled a lot of people and got everybody distracted. And so I think, from a 10 to 20 year perspective, I would not be surprised if there are really great businesses. I just don't know what they are yet. I think the other problem is, and this is a problem that all of Silicon Valley has, is we don't think something's successful unless it's $100 billion business. Which is like, honestly, what if like crypto is amazing, but it's actually like a $4 billion like market maker? Is that a failure? Like, I don't know. But like everybody would assume it was. Everybody like came out of the gate and were like, hey, here's this new thing. If this is not $1 trillion, it's a failure. And I think sometimes when you're innovative in an industry, you have to kind of maybe pare down your expectations and say, hey, let's start a bit smaller. And so my gut is I think crypto and DeFi is going to be around, but I think it's going to be like a couple $1 billion business here. It's a couple $1 billion business here. And they're solving a little bit more niche problems. Like, I don't know, they're providing like stable coin solutions as like remittances to like in between second and third world countries. Okay, cool. Great business. It's like better than Western Union. Is it the next, Stripe plus Facebook plus Google? No, but it's providing real value. Maybe in 10 years, we've taken out all the market makers that are just like, coupon clipping trades. And now it's more decentralized and the actual end nodes make money somehow. I don't know. And like, that's a great $5 billion public company. Yeah, cool. I think that's probably where the world's going to end up.
Yeah, people struggle with the math, right? They look at it and they go like, this is game changing. And then actually when you do the math, to your point of, international settlements to replace Western Union between a few third world and second world countries that don't have like trusted banking systems between them. Sure. But what's the market cap of Western Union? 3 billion.
Well, and that's where I feel like it's VC's fault in a lot of cases with this is like, when you're pumping $26 billion last year into this ecosystem, it's very hard to figure out utility and what's not speculation and what actually, like it really leads to a lot of different perverse incentives. And for people to feel like they have product market fit when they're really wash trading enablement, or they're like it's like they're robbing one person to pay the other, and then they're skimming off the top and they think they have a business when in truth it's just this big circular jerk that's going on, right? And like it's not a product market fit that exists.
Yeah, look, if you raise 30 billion a year for 4 years, let's just call it 100 billion of dollars that are looking for returns, and at a minimum 2x, right? So you're searching for 200 billion, probably more, of returns. And if the whole market size is actually, to William's point, 10, 15, whatever, I don't know, something that's not 200, that's where you run into issues. And that's probably what ends up happening, right? You see a bunch of like interesting companies that are pretty small in the grand scheme of things. And as a percentage of the total dollars that entered the ecosystem, it's just like mostly lighting that money on fire. But a few things will emerge that have some stability to them potentially.
I went to Chicago and started hanging out and going through the Second City Training Center and then performing at Second City because I wanted to get on Saturday Night Live. I actually showed up, as you will have heard from other interviews. I showed up at Second City the same day Steve Carell did. So Steve and I went through the whole training center together and performed when we first started out performed there together in the same group.
Could you tell, by the way, with Carell at that point, like, could you tell he had a star quality?
Yes, but. So the yes, but is, I became friends with, a bunch of those folks who were all there at the same time. Rachel Dratch, Adam McKay, who went on to direct a bunch of the Will Ferrell movies and The Big Short. Yeah. All those people were there. And it was, it was amazing. You Operate Citizens Brigade was formed at the time. So, Amy Poehler was there and all those guys and Tina Fey was there at the same time. It was just amazing. So you could tell that you could tell that he was great. I mean, he was always a great improviser. He and Tina were like remarkable improvisers, but the big but is there were a number of people there who were world-class good, and you always thought, man, this person's going to be like straight to SNL and films and everything else. And I would say that the people who all of us thought were maybe the funniest, are people who didn't make it for one reason or another. Either they did they auditioned for SNL and they're like, we already have a fat guy, or we already have the straight guy. We already have Will Ferrell who plays the, straight guy or whatever. So just all sorts of random reasons, Steve auditioned for SNL a couple times and didn't get it. He ended up going and kind of grinding and got the Dana Carvey show, but then that got canceled and was a roving reporter on the Daily Show, and then finally got Judd Apatow cast him in 40-Year-Old Virgin, and then it was off to the races. He got The Office after that.
Has that informed a little bit of like your perspective to investing now? Just like you see this randomness associated with greatness, and like Carell had to grind. I always think about like George Clooney, and breaking through at like 42 or something, and the lack of linearity in the acting world of careers where you're like John Hamm, and it's like, I'm this handsome, charismatic, good actor who at 38 like has nothing to show for it, right? It's this very weird lack of linearity in profession. I think it would drive me insane. But did that actually inform like your investing mindset that like, hey, even if all this talent aligns, you still actually have to get really lucky with things?
I think it's informed more than just my investing mindset. It informed my mindset about everything. Like, it informed my mindset about the fact that when you're like the CEO of a major company and you're in the news every day and, and whatever says you're, some, I don't know, Vanity Fair puts you as, you're number 8 on whatever list. Like it informs like, hey man, this could be anybody. Like this is randomly me. It could be anybody. I am lucky to be here. Just gotta, keep my head down and keep going. And so I never got too wrapped around the axle on any of that stuff, just because it informed the fact that, man, like it's just you need to be working hard and you need to be doing everything you need to do, but then you also need to be a little bit lucky. So that always helped keep me grounded, I think.
Yeah, it's interesting. Now, Second City, for people that don't know it, I guess I sort of grew up in watching the Bill Murrays or the Chris Farleys or Tina Fey's as well, of the world from a comedy standpoint. But it's brought through so much talent in SNL specifically, improv at Broad, right? Was there some formula or like structure to it? Obviously, there's these compounding network effects that exist with something when it becomes a brand like that, like SNL has, like Sequoia Capital has, right? Or whatever it is. But or was there anything unique to it?
No, it had the impact that it had was everyone knew it was kind of a little bit, it was, you couldn't really yet use the Groundlings as an on-ramp to SNL at the time I was there. It wasn't really a big deal yet in LA. So Second City, which is, for people who don't know it, this famous improv comedy theater in Chicago, was the place to go. So Dratch and Tina came in from the East Coast. There were people who came in from the West Coast. Lots and lots of people from Big Ten schools ended up coming there. Steve, I think, had gone to college at Denison, went right there. So anyone who was trying to work their way onto SNL who wasn't doing stand-up, and, this is again, it's improv theater, not stand-up, came to Second City, just because they all knew this is the path to get to SNL, and this is where SNL will cast most of its cast from, and they did.
Got it. Was there all those precedents of John Candy? I mean, I guess Candy wasn't on SNL, but Chris Farley and Belushi and Bill Murray and all those guys, I think were all SNL people.
Yep. They were all Second City.
And they were all Second City as well. And then there was that next generation.
Rachel, Tina, Amy Poehler, a bunch of the other ECB founders. Matt Walsh has been quite successful on Veep. Again, Adam McKay, Dave Koechner, who's in Anchorman with that Adam directed as the sportscaster with the cowboy hat. All those people were at Second City at the same time. It was amazing. And, and Carell and lots of Steve Colbert, we were all there at the same time. It was funny because it was like really the second big heyday of Second City. When you're there, at the time, you don't think of it. You're not looking around going, this is the heyday of Second City, but it was.
Yeah, it's funny. You calibrate to I'm the lower mid of the pack, right? And it turned out, well, the lower mid of the pack is actually on SNL as well, right? And this whole calibration thing. Was that just a unique moment in time that the stars kind of aligned?
I don't even know. It was just we were just kind of all doing our thing and not really, it's like when you're doing it, you don't really have a sense of these are the funniest people that will ever come through here. You're just you're grinding away and you're all trying to figure it out and make it. I did know when you would see McKay on stage or Carell or Tina, you would just think you would be in the audience, any of the other improvisers in the audience, you'd just be like, wow, that was, I don't know if I would have been able to do that, or I don't know if I would have, been able to come up with that. Just amazing, just genius improvisers and really always on and always great. When they would come on stage, man, this will be pay attention. This will be good.
Yeah, it's interesting. I have a handful of friends that you just they have a celebrity star quality to them. And I'm not really sure if they're ever actually going to end up being celebrities or stars in their own right. But you sort of know that when they walk in a room, they just have a presence about them. I think people have always sort of described Bill Bill Clinton as that way that he sort of just captivates a room. And I can imagine that these people just have to be so quick on their feet. And well, I guess that's an interesting question. Like in improv itself, is there any trait that like spikes I mean, being funny, obviously, but like, is there anything that you found was uniquely consistent across the people that actually made it?
No. The people who are good improvisers are not planning ahead what they're going to say. They're just literally really in the moment and going with the flow, whatever, reacting to whatever's been said. And they're not like thinking ahead. They're just saying what comes next to them and it comes up. But there's nothing that there's nothing you could define as a characteristic you could go learn or a trait you could train that would teach you to help you be one of them. There were just people like, and again, talk about, you may or may not know these names. I mean, Eric Hoffman and Jody Lennon, who were also at Second City in the Annoyance Theater, they were another two people who would get on stage and everyone would go, okay, be quiet. Like, stop, no more side talking. I want to watch this. Because they were just like, you knew it was going to be one of the funniest things you'd seen that night. And to be able to do that consistently in improv is, crazy hard.
Yeah. It's an interesting analogy. And I've heard you draw this in the past, but like not pre-planning thing. Like if you end up being too scripted, I have my notes. I want us to improv this, but I have my notes up in front of me. So not all of this is from my mind. But if you end up being too scripted, you just, and that's of your career, that's of like a conversation with someone else, like it sort of loses the element. I remember one time I was doing this and I was like, well, we can cut and we can break and like, let's just try to put the best of it together. And it was so awkward and it was a total disaster. And so I actually had the guest, we both went and grabbed a beer and we're like, hey, let's throw all that out. Let's start over here because of the awkwardness associated with it. But I guess it's a kind of interesting analogy to your career path that I've heard you draw in the past. So you did this for 5 years-ish?
A while, 5, 6, 7 years, something like that. Yeah. I had a few auditions. I just didn't get anything. So I was like, all right, I got to like go get a real job.
What was the closest you came?
I mean, the closest I came wasn't very close. I had auditions for SNL and Mad TV, which was another sort of sketch comedy, a sketch comedy thing on TV like SNL back in the day in the 90s. Didn't get either of those. You have to get, for SNL to get it, after first auditions, they'll call a select few people to New York and do readings on set with cast members in New York. And I didn't make it to that point. And if you did, you had a much better chance of getting cast, obviously, but even if you did, you didn't, it wasn't a guaranteed thing. So I didn't get very far. And after a few of those, I was like, all right, I got to go get a job.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I don't know. A lot of famous people came out of Mad TV as well, right? I think Artie Lang and Keegan Michael Key or whatever his name is, and there's a handful of. Yeah, I mean, those are you're pretty modest on. You came close to like two of the iconic things I think out there, but So you were part-timing at you were doing some packing at like a Crate and Barrel or
No, I worked behind the register at Crate and Barrel because I had to have like odd jobs where I could, we would perform at night and then rehearse during the day. So you're like, all right, well, I can't get a full-time job where I work regular hours during the day and I can't get a full-time job where I work regular hours at night. So I had to have odd jobs. You don't make any money performing I don't know what they make now, but you just didn't make any money. Even if you kind of made it to the main stage at Second City, there are sort of 3 or 4 different casts before you're on the main stage.
And so you're sitting here thinking, I have a CS degree from Michigan.
Like I was working at a coat check room at some club, random hours, and this guy in my graduating class in Michigan like comes in and hands his coat to me and recognizes me, and you could tell it's like, oh man, like what happened? I think he thought I was like a meth addict or something. Like, oh man, things really went south for you. It's only been like 18 months. What happened?
Yeah. What substance did you get into in between here and there?
Yeah. Oh, right.
Was that like okay, I guess it was only 18 months at that point. So was there any moment that you were like, all right, now I got to go, I'm going to go get a real job?
No, it was only after you just didn't have any. I remember just the constant stress of not having money was a drag, but I was just grinding it out, and I thought like, well, I'll just keep it going. But once I auditioned a few times, didn't get it. I was like, all right, like this was getting ridiculous. I've been here, 6-7 years. I got to go get a job.
Do you look back with like some nostalgia about that moment in time, and you're like, I didn't know any better. I was just, I was just poor and trying to make it around funny people and all, or is it kind of like, gosh, my life is so much better now. I'm living in Napa and, bouncing back and forth. Which one, or can you?
No, I don't have any. I've never had that, like, I don't know. I'm not one of those people who ever was like, God, weren't those were the best years. I'm never, like, I just don't think that way. I don't think that way about anything. I've always felt like, man, this next year is going to be amazing. And I don't have it, but I also don't have any regrets about it. I mean, it was, crazy. Again, you ended up being there in the heyday of Second City, which we didn't know at the time, but those people were all great and all like so fun to be around.
And maybe for like a little history, and then Kate, I'd love to get your take on this. If you think of the way healthcare has been paid for, most healthcare is reimbursed by an insurance company. We don't have to go into who pays for the actual underlying insurance, but it's meant to reimburse for medical care, right? Like it was designed around providing care by doctors, kind of the easiest way to think about this, for a very specific set of work that they would do. And in many cases, it's not like perfectly this way, but based on the amount of time that it would take and the complexity of what that doctor was doing. And you get these situations in healthcare where not everything is about the like specific medical care that the doctor is providing. There's like supportive care benefits actually in women's health. This is probably one of the biggest areas where it's not just about, the physical exam or the diagnostic procedure. There's like plenty of stuff around it, but our healthcare system was not really designed to pay for that stuff. And so you see employers having to pony up money for like extra benefits that the typical insurance plan just simply doesn't cover. And then you kind of combine it. And I'm curious what your take on this, but the history of designing who gets paid for what and what's paid for by insurance is kind of negotiated by a panel of doctors with Medicare. And then it kind of like trickles down from there with the commercial insurance companies. And most of those doctors are basically like old white guys. And so you've seen like significant under reimbursement for women's health because the people sitting in the dark room deciding on what is covered and what isn't, and what's medical care and what isn't medical care are basically just like old men. And we're paying for that now downstream. At least that's been my impression. I'm not like super in the weeds on the exact codes.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I think there was a very famous picture during the last administration where everyone's talking about maternity benefits, and there was this big, debate like, oh my gosh, why should the average taxpayer have to pay for maternity benefits? And it was a room full of men, and there was not a single woman in that room. And it was basically saying like, only women should pay more for their health insurance and healthcare because they're the ones having the babies. And so I think, that point of view has certainly led to, I think, underfunded major underfunded areas and just enormous gaps in care. And I think we see it in the statistics. The United States has the worst maternal death rate among all peer nations and in the developed world. And that's actually increased during COVID by 21%, which is pretty horrifying. And when you look at C-section rates compared to, what the World Health Organization would recommend in a country, like the U.S., we're 20 percentage points above that. When you look at just all of these stats compared against many, many other countries, I mean, we're just consistently last.
Hey, Kate, and so maybe like a specific one on that, because you bring it up and it's interesting to me. So like, as I understand it, at a very literal level, like there's these outcome related services that maybe my health insurance covers, right? And so one of those could be like pregnancy, but there's a lot of things that exist outside of pregnancy that could be preventative or educational or supportive from a benefit standpoint that would be helpful that's not actually the childbirth. And so I guess one, is that right? And two, you use the example of C-sections, which I think is an interesting one. And I would love for you to drill down on that, because as I understand it, C-sections are very easy for the doctor and very hard for the woman. And basically, because of how the incentives are structured, the doctors, we disproportionately lean on C-sections in our country because the doctors, it's predictable. They can get back out of the surgery room exactly when they want to, versus the randomness associated with a non-C-section childbirth, right? Can you touch on those two things just to expand on that point?
Yeah, I would think of it as like, what is the most surprising and yet important thing that insurance typically doesn't cover that you help with?
So I would say that the most surprising thing about what insurance doesn't cover is pretty much everything outside of your core OB visits. So whereas, the technology in the labor and delivery rooms has gotten better and better, it's certainly much better than it was 100 years ago. There's just really obvious things like the way that that presence of a doula can reduce the C-section rate. And so at a population level, it would make sense to reimburse doulas. And you're starting to see some of that across the states. But, that whole concept was just, even though the economics and the numbers just proved how important that would be, just not there. I think mental health, we still have a long way to go. 1 out of 5 women suffer from some kind of perinatal mental health issue. That's also not baked into reimbursement models and can lead to, worse outcomes. And so, things like this, like for instance, breastfeeding, higher breastfeeding rates is linked to lower rates of heart disease in women. That's a little bit longer term than just the short term, but heart disease is one of the top killers of women. And so you would think that like just little tweaks to the model would from a population level really actually drive better outcomes and reduce costs. And so none of that was being taken into consideration. And then even areas like miscarriage, 1 out of 4 or 1 out of 5 pregnancies end in miscarriage, and there's just nothing there. And so those are some examples of just, fertility aside, like even in the core pregnancy episode, there's just so much that's not covered. Women's health, physical therapy as well, pelvic floor. And then when it comes to C-sections, you look at some of the incentives then that as women are going through this experience and now they're in the healthcare system where there's, tons of misaligned incentives. The childbirth is the number one reason for hospitalization in the U.S. Lots of money is made on childbirth. And so there are things sometimes in hospitals where on the labor and delivery floor, they might have a rule where a woman can only labor for 8 hours and then they have to do the C-section because it's heads in beds, or, or it could be the doctor's choice and the doctor's just trying to kind of get through a certain number of patients that day because they're paid more when they do the C-section versus just kind of a vaginal birth. And, there are great doctors out there, and there are great hospitals out there, but there's also, not great doctors out there. And there are also rules in some of these hospitals that are to minimize medical malpractice versus do what's best for the patient. And so, all of this is what, as a woman is going through, and a family too, a couple really, is going through this very vulnerable experience where it's not just your own health, but it's the health of the baby that you're bringing into the world. Everything is just so cosmic all the time and so existential. And so to think that you're going through this big experience in a system that's actually not designed for you and sometimes is designed in ways that are not helping you, I think you just need such an advocate, and Maven is that advocate to help you through all of these decisions that you have to make.
So, and I always used to give this example to people of like, contracts are complicated. There's a reason why you have like lawyers and courts, is because it's really difficult to predefine everything in a contract because you don't know how the world is going to plan out. And the simplest example I always like to give people is like, what if I say to you, you have to go and paint my house blue? And you go, great, how much? And I say $5,000. Cool, done. That's a contract, right? And it seems simple at the outset. But now you've got like, well, what if I painted it the wrong shade of blue? Or I painted it, I missed a spot, or, I didn't paint it on time. And what you realize is like, actually contracts are kind of more guiding the outcome than anything else. And there's a reason we have like systems in place. It's because you can't predefine everything. And so what you end up with is like, all right, I gotta write all the possible edge case scenarios into the contract. And I agree with you, like, yes, for that little niche box that you just described, which is basically like gambling on the internet, like crypto is fucking awesome. That's just like a really tiny market of like digital gambling. The whole other thing, everyone always uses, it's not to pick on you, but like everyone always talks about like, oh, the immediate settlement. Let's just talk about why like that's a bad thing. In the reason like some of these decentralized services don't have like liquidation issues is because it's fully collateralized, meaning like all of your money is there. There's no other, you can't borrow, you can't lend. The whole point of the financial system, the whole point of banking is to be able to issue credit, right? It's to create money out of money. Otherwise, like you're fixed in the number of dollars. It's the same reason why when I go to a bank, I put in a deposit and the bank can lend it out multiple times. And so the banking system like enables credit in a way where like fully collateralized lending obviously doesn't. If you collateralize everything, it's like you got to have absolutely everything there. If you were to have like an immediate unwind in an illiquidity situation, if you go back to 2008, when the US banking system kind of froze up and you said, hey, I'm going to take the real-time dollar amount value of all the underlying assets and I'm going to use that to decide whether someone is illiquid, every single bank in the United States is insolvent immediately. And in the crypto world, then we're just like, all right, cool, the banks are done. We take this down. It's actually a feature to be able to unwind things in a proper, slow manner, because in a liquidity crisis, which is every banking crisis in the history of time, is a liquidity crisis at its core, meaning like we're not sure who owns what, we don't know exactly how much it's worth, is because you have these asset classes where the underlying value of the asset, in this case in 2008, it was real estate assets, you're just like, oh shit, I don't know what, I need time to go and figure this out. And the idea that like in a crypto world, we're just gonna immediately liquidate everything, I never understand why people pitch that as a feature. Like to me, that is a disastrous scenario where those black swan events basically bankrupt anybody who's taken out any sort of credit. The whole point of the banking system is to enable safe credit. And here we are saying, actually, that's like not exactly what we want. We want the opposite. We want fully collateralized. And if in a minute your credit, the underlying assets for your credit are in trouble, we're just going to take your money. That's the crypto system.
Do you want to comment on that, David?
Yeah, sure. There's a number of different ways to take that in. It's really about layering a financial system. And so you can do all the things that, what we call in the crypto world TradFi, traditional finance. You can do all TradFi things on top of crypto, but it's important to have some things based on the foundation. Irreversible payments need to be at the foundation, and you can build reversible payments on top of irreversible payments. Can't do it the other way around. Same thing with like a credit-based financial system.
What does that mean? You can't build irreversible payments in the existing financial system? Of course you can.
No, you can. So crypto is a paradigm of irreversible payments on a blockchain.
Correct.
And you can build systems on top of that if we desire reversible payments to revert them. Okay. But it's about the ordering of operations here.
Why is that better?
Same thing with like a bank where you have a collateral-based system. But you can create a credit-based system on top of a collateral-based system. But if you put the credit system under the collateralized system, it doesn't work because it's the cart before the horse.
Well, I have no idea.
And so the whole idea is that you can create any sort of permutation of the things that we are already aware of in normal finance, so long as we actually create the base principles correctly, which is a solid financial system that is operated by smart contracts that have this security that if you deposit your assets, you will 100% get your assets back no matter what. And that is something that the legal system cannot offer. And so we need to build a financial system using crypto rails, using crypto-based principles that uses the strength of crypto, and we can still have all these magical tools that we already have, so long as we have strong settlement assurances under these layers.
So you're telling me there's massive demand out there for irreversible payments?
I think there is a massive market out there for strong settlement assurances that guarantee that your asset is yours. Strong property rights are the foundation that created America.
Do you see people like some random person shows up and is like, oh, your house is mine now, or like your bank account, like this show
and so happen. You don't put that on that layer. That's the wrong layer for that.
My point
is, houses are never going to be on the blockchain because houses are always a meat-based piece of technology.
When was the last time anybody in this room had their checking account money stolen?
Well, you're in America.
It doesn't happen.
You're in America, so like it's a narrow-ish viewpoint.
You're telling me across the world there is consistent theft of people's money in their checking. Like, what the fuck are we talking about? This doesn't happen. Like,
as somebody who's operated in crypto since 2017, I've never been rug pulled. No one's stolen any of my funds, and that's because I have the assurances that no one can actually do.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like
no, but I get it. I get the
checking
point.
accounts are like a pull-based system. They can pull money out of your account.
Was there any moment that you saw, because people draw parallels today between crypto and the internet, right, and all of that, and we can go down that rabbit hole. I think you have some more optimism about crypto than maybe I do, but people certainly draw parallels about like that time versus this. Were there tangible things that, like, from a speculative standpoint, because, you know, Amazon obviously emerged from that time. Google was a couple years after, you know, their eBay is still worth $30-50 billion. PayPal still worth 200 or whatever. So like, it's not like there was no value created then, but was there something that you just saw from a, hey, this is speculative clearly, and there's retail money propping this stuff up?
So the parallels to crypto are bright. You know, so remember back in the early days of Amazon, there was a widespread feeling that you're an idiot if you gave your credit card to any online retailer.
Oh, totally. There's some hilarious newspaper like Barron's covers with Bezos on the cover, right?
Yeah, and then there's, you know, the Pets.com and 1,000 other companies that, you know, all they had was a website and no business and no sales, and people just speculated on that. So, you know, the pure speculation on just a bulletin board stock, right? Or even if it went NASDAQ, is 100% analogous to the speculation on tokens. It's the same thing, right? There's no there, but it's just supply and demand. And by the way, it wasn't just back then. There's 20,000 bulletin board, pink sheets, over-the-counter stocks traded today, where you'll see bankrupt companies trading 2 million shares a day, and they're bankrupt. There's no chance unless you can get a greater fool to buy from you. And so, you know, it was very analogous there. In terms of the real fundamentals, it was the same, right? You know, there's got to be utility. And lots of people argued over the utility of walking into a Barnes & Noble versus buying a book from Amazon and who would do what. Lots of people argued about PayPal. Do people really just need a few lines of code in their software, and how valuable was that when there were credit cards and all you have to do is put in your credit cards? And so there was a lot of argument about utility. I think if there's a difference between then and now, because the internet was kind of a unified platform, right? Where even though there were issues, everybody worked on the internet. Whereas today with crypto, there's an unlimited number of blockchains that are the platforms, right? Even though there's an underpinning of X number of ISPs basically that are enabling all that communications with the blockchains. Right now, anybody, with a little bit of time and effort can create their own blockchain, much like you could create your own website back then. But there's not one unified platform like the internet. And so that creates a lot of uncertainties. And, Warren Buffett has this saying, first there's the innovators, then there's the imitators, then there's the idiots. And so right now, like with the web, we're evolving. We've evolved out of that imitator phase where everybody copies the Uber of whatever. And we're coming out of that idiot phase. And what we need now, like we needed back then, was new innovation. Crypto doesn't have that new innovation. DeFi is set, right? There's other, NFTs and some other smart contract applications are set, but there's no other ubiquitous platform that your mom or your grandmother, or your dad just has to use. Whereas with the internet, it was an obvious path, right?
And there's a lot of breakage, by the way, even NFTs, we can agree, like maybe they have value, maybe they don't, right? And digital scarcity and whatever.
NFTs is just a collectible, right?
People will believe it or they won't, and who knows, right? The DeFi thing's interesting.
It's like a Picasso, right? Either you believe there's value there or you don't. It's up to you.
Yeah. And there's such a thing as digital scarcity, right? Like there's a finite amount of storage on our phone with pictures, and we can argue about that, and people will either agree or not. The utility will be an interesting one. DeFi, there's elements of it that I think can be impactful, and certainly impactful, if not from an economic standpoint, but from a quality of human life standpoint, like, whatever, escaping a country or whatever, all that stuff, right? And digital gold and all that. But there's so much breakage right now that exists of just like fraud.
There was more back then. The difference was you got all your information from a few websites, right? Or you got all your information from traditional media. Whereas with social media, there's just so much spam, so much garbage that it's hard to segregate the signal from the noise. But I think the fundamental difference is with crypto, you can structure organizations so that they're flatter, right? They're not hierarchical. Whereas prior to crypto, like if you're starting a company today, whether you want to get in, call it a DAO or whatever you want to call it, you could be far more horizontal, and it works with crypto. Whereas if I'm starting a corporation today for almost any other startup, it's going to be a hierarchical organization, period, end of story.
Is that a good thing? People always argue about like, oh, your customers can actually be your owners and all that, but you've sold enterprise software, right? And like, I don't know if our customers we want them telling us on product development or, hiring people and incentive structures. Do you think it's going to be widespread? Do you think there's a handful of use cases that it makes sense? I sort of struggle with like that.
No, I think there's plenty of use cases, and it's not so much your customers, because I've always said you never listen to your customers because they don't know what they don't know yet, right? Your job is to invent what your customers don't know that they need yet. That's what creates, home runs. But at the same time, there's situations where hierarchical companies have to make decisions about the circumstances of their customers. And one of the easiest examples is healthcare insurance, right? You want a pre-authorization. Well, there's somebody, the first call, they're saying no. And then you always talk to the manager. They're saying no. Then you try to work your way up, and hopefully you're not dead by that time, but you've caused a lot of consternation. In a distributed environment where somebody is creating a node, they put up let's just say it's Ethereum, and they're putting up 2 Ethereum to create a node to be trained, to be able to be a decision maker in a distributed healthcare insurance environment. And there's 1,000 nodes that have been trained, and Mark has a request for a pre-authorization for Synthroid. The hypothyroid is a drug I take, right? And so rather than dealing with a hierarchical organization like we do now, and it's the health insurance company trying to find ways not to do it, these 1,000 arbitrators of it who are paid to be the arbitrator, they get a yield through their staking, right? They get to make the decision, and it's majority rules, right? Or you can do an optimistic roll-up where you could say, in an optimistic roll-up, there's a challenge node, right? Where there's a node that gets paid just to review all the decisions by the 1,000, 10,000, 100,000. And if they think somebody's is being fraudulent, they get to challenge them. And if they win the challenge, they get their stake. And if they lose the challenge, they give up their stake. So in those particular cases where you don't want just an individual or two or hierarchical organization who's only interested in the bottom line over patient health, I'll take the distributed organization all day, every day. And I think everybody would as well for insurance applications. And there's other applications the same way. So I see the need, but to create that is going to be years and a lot of money. And so, whereas with the internet, once you got to the point where if you had broadband, and in a laptop, you could create almost anything.
Yeah, it turns out that the reason this exchange was so popular was that everybody who showed up in the last few years to trade made a ton of money off of Alameda. And when you're basically like selling dollars for 80 cents, it's actually not a great long-term business model, but it does generate quite a bit of customer interest. Here's what I was thinking about this last night, because I knew I was coming on and didn't have anything to say besides which is not like a good 30-minute podcast. And here's like what I think I learned. Maybe this is my philosophical take. When I was first getting started in startups and just like in business, whatever that means, you look at these people who made a lot of money in any context, doesn't have to be in software, and you're like, oh, look how smart and amazing these people are. And, you're very deferential to them because somehow they made a bunch of money. So clearly they must be smart. And so we make this assumption that anybody who like accumulated wealth is intelligent. And I think as I've gotten older, I've realized like that's just not true. There are like a lot of people who have accumulated wealth by just taking insane amounts of risk and just being the one person in the distribution who didn't get caught. And like in classic software, it's really hard to do that because if you're not good at what you do, it shines in your product. People don't buy it. They don't pay for it, right? And so most people who are in this industry are like classic software people, myself at least included, where you go, you look at, oh, there's more customers. There's more revenue. This thing is growing. It must be doing well. And it turns out that growth in finance doesn't actually necessarily mean that the business is doing well. It just means that there's like interesting things for people from a finance perspective to participate. It's the same reason why the buy now, pay later stuff to me, it's every time they talk about customer growth, it's if you loosen your lending standards, as an example, like, of course people are going to show up because your product is giving people money, right? If you think about what the actual product is, it's I lend you money. If you're really bad at lending, you actually grow faster. And this is the same thing in the exchanges, the same thing in crypto in a way, right? Which is if you're really bad at trading, the other side of it, more people are going to show up to trade with you. And I think what we got wrong, or a lot of people got wrong in an industry, is they looked at growth as this like perfect, this is product market fit. Look at the numbers. And it turns out actually what's happening is those who are the craziest and the riskiest grow the fastest. It's like inversely correlated with the people who do proper risk management, because if I can show up and trade with an idiot, I'm going to keep showing up and trading with an idiot. In the same way, I'll happy to take that loan that I don't deserve. And it's that same, you said it earlier, and I continue to reiterate this to people. It's like we're learning the rules of finance, just a bunch of software people learning the rules of finance over and over again. And anybody who has experience in finance would tell you that. Yeah, if somebody is like handing out free money, guess who shows up? Everybody who wants free money. And that tends to be like a fairly large number of people. And that's, I don't know, that's my take.
And if it's free money, it also lends to grifters and all of that. I will say SBF's, the Twitter DMs that he had with the reporter from Vox, there's some like pretty deranged and delusional things that he said throughout that we've talked in the past about, like how when you reach a certain level of people saying yes around you, like I think Kanye West suffers from this, your worldview just gets so distorted because everyone is just treating you so differently. You're like a zoo animal, right? And it's clear that his world has been so distorted over the last 2 years. But one of the actual profound things, and he said it in a very nihilist, cynical way, obviously, but he said, some of the decade's greatest heroes will never be known, and some of the most beloved people are basically shams, right? And it's an interesting concept of this whole fooled by randomness thing, that actually the people that are on the outer end of the risk curve end up one of two ways. We never hear about them, right?
Yeah, because they blow up.
Yeah, or we over extrapolate like what they did and say, hey, these are the lessons that we should learn. And one of the things that I think I've learned throughout this whole crypto thing, and I give you credit for it, but I also, you have a very close buddy who I cornered at a bar for basically 3 hours just asking questions, who might be the most cynical person I've ever spoken to from first principles perspective of investigating things at their root, right? And one of the things that in general, I guess I've learned over the last couple of years is there's all these experts, so to speak, or just people that we don't have enough time in our day to go to the root cause of all of the things that actually occur. And so we have all these gatekeepers, or we have all these experts that like basically synthesize the information for us and then tell us some version of events, some narrative that we internalize, just because I don't have the time to go analyze all the different regulatory filings that exist, nor do I have the time to go down the YouTube, Google rabbit hole to understand all the different scams that like could exist in these different industries. And it's just to see how willfully manipulated those people can be by these narratives, and then how they're then fed to us in such a way. And it's across all industries. Like SBF is actually, you think about the brand co-opting that he did through this effective altruism thing, through the investors that he had, through the association with celebrities, like all of these things were basically lending credibility to someone that deserved none, right? And it's, gosh, how many times are these going on at a smaller scale? It's really depressing to think about like how misrepresented so many narratives are to us, and how many, to his words, the most beloved people are basically shams.
I don't disagree with anything you said. I agree with what you said. I think in finance in particular, it's exacerbated because risky behavior is incredibly well rewarded in the short run. Unlike in almost any other industry where like the cycles take a while to play out, there's like a real investment period before you can see your progress. Actually, in finance, the riskiest people in a bull market look like geniuses, right? Because you're taking on the most risk. And as the bull market continues up, you look like a genius. And so all of those people that were like the crypto experts, the people who did super well early on, my perspective is they were just the ones without any sort of like controls and risk management. And yeah, you look good when the entire category is growing because you're the one on the front end of the risk curve and everything looks great. And then when the music stops, all the behaviors that got you there are the exact same behaviors that caused you to blow up. It's the same thing. The fact that you were unwilling to look at the risk of a particular investment that got you there because you're the one at the first, you're the first in because you don't do any diligence, right? And then the whole thing goes wild. Now you look like a genius. You're like, well, why would I ever do diligence? Look how much money I make when I don't do it. And all of a sudden the whole thing blows up. I think that's what happened here. Imagine for a second, if you were trying to run like a crypto exchange that like didn't offer crazy, insane leverage, or that wasn't like basically handing money to its customers through some like hidden hedge fund, you probably would not be a successful exchange. And so all the people who were like reasonably running these businesses with proper controls were effectively competed out by actually being good at their job.
Yeah.
The thing you were supposed to do is what got you in trouble in terms of growth. And then FTX picked you up or the business collapsed and here we are. And just looking underneath the hood, you're realizing like, wow, the lack of controls here is like shocking even to our own perspective. Anyway, that's what I think would happen. This industry has evolved in like 4 years. It's been like 4 years, 5 years where this whole thing blew up recently. And it's all the crazy people.
So that'll do it for the 45th episode of Cartoon Avatars. Thank you, everyone, for joining this year, for listening in, for catching all the highlights, for the suggestions, for the shares, the likes, all of that stuff. It's been very much appreciated. It's been a gratifying experience. We've learned a lot, tried a lot of different things. We're going to keep going here. We'll see to what end. We'll see who we bring on. We'll see how the show continues to evolve. But it's definitely been a fun, interesting kind of learning experience, and I appreciate everyone bearing with me as I've gone through it. Special thanks to Rashad, to Justin, and Andrew for all their help, and look forward to seeing everyone in the new year for the 46th episode of Cartoon Avatars. Have a good weekend, everyone.